activity could have positive health effects.
Look, we're not expecting you to go to the gym. That's clearly not happening. Just walk outside for a few blocks and then come back home. You can bring potato chips if that's what it'll take.
For many years, the health department has encouraged Americans to watch less TV, but this report reverses that, saying, quote, watch whatever the hell you want, but at least pay attention and remember who the characters are, or just admire the colors. Colors are pretty. It's expected that following the advice in this report will cut down on the largest cause of death among Americans, laying on your back until your mouth fills up with saliva and you drown. Following the report's release, the most popular exercise now seems to be masturbating, but researchers warn that if you do it in public, stick to the sidewalk or you might get hit by cars.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program. The phone lines are open if you want to join us. And you can bring up absolutely anything you want to discuss here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian.
And Arya.
Arya, you are also known beyond just being a host here on Free Talk Live as the High Priestess of the Reformed Satanic Church.
This is true.
That you founded here in Keene, New Hampshire. Despite the fact that the government would like you to believe that it is a quote-unquote purported church, it is actually, in point of fact, a real church. That,
to my knowledge, they've never made that accusation against the Reformed Satanic Church.
Oh, really?
I don't think that they have.
I think they did.
I know they certainly have alluded to it at a few occasions. Like they've listed it alongside things like Church of the Invisible Hand or whatever, but... Yeah. But part of the conspiracy charge that I understood was that they were trying to paint the connection that the Reformed Satanic Church was, similar in nature to those, but it wasn't going to stick from what I could tell. It was all very confusing and very hazy to me at this time because I've got a lot going on in regard to all this case. I don't remember every little detail. However, I don't recall they were actually trying to. They seemed to recognize that there was some difference between the Reformed Satanic Church and some other churches, which is, obviously, whatever difference there may or may not be is just in theology. However, the Satanist aspect of it, there's a lot borrowed from that. I think the government has tangled with Satanism several times, and they've lost every single time. So
they have.
I don't think they were in any hurry to kick off that battle again. And obviously, the Church of Satan, not very good friends with me. I can't stand them. They can't stand me. However, that's
have
not
you actually had an interaction with them? Like you say they can't stand you?
Not in an official capacity, but some of its members, I know them, what they stand for, their ideology, and it's fundamentally opposed to everything that I stand for and everything that Satanism stands for.
Hence the Reformed Satanic Church. I think they would have, had you gone to the Crypto 6 trial, I think they would have tried to
I think so.
Insult your church as well. They seem, I don't remember specifically what they were doing up there with regard to all of the churches, but that was sort of their whole thing. Anyway, I bring it up because it's in the news. Satanism is making headlines again here, and this is for the Global Order of Satan UK. So we've heard of the Satanic Temple, and we've heard of the Church of Satan. The Church of Satan goes back some decades. Anton LaVey, I believe, was co-founder or founder of that, and that's the one that used to get the headlines. These days, you don't really see much about the Church of Satan anymore. You see a lot about the Satanic Temple, and they've been getting a lot of headlines, and for good reason, because they've been fighting, I would say, mostly a good fight with regards to...
Yeah, I love the Satanic Temple.
Yeah, with regards to equal access for various different religions to governmental bodies and such. So if there's like a Christian club at a school, then the Satanists from the Satanic Temple will come in there and say, oh, you got a Christian club here? All right, we're going to start a Satan club.
Yeah.
Oh, you're saying no to that? Well, now we're going to sue you. Yeah. Oh, and or they'll send somebody into... like a city council meeting where they'll have a prayer that's being led by some Christian preacher, and they'll say, well, we need to get our prayer week. What week can we schedule our satanic prayer, and then stir up controversy there.
And Christians and just religious people in general, they don't understand. They're like, they're just trying to start a fight. Yes, they are trying to start a fight, because there shouldn't be a fight over this in the first place. If you're going to have your Christian prayer, yes, I'm just starting a fight by saying, hey, now we need to have my satanic prayer. However, I'm still in the right.
Yes, that's right. And it's if it's a supposedly separation of church and state, then if you're gonna have a state connected to a religion, then it has to connect to any religion. And of course, the Satanic Temple has probably really got on the map for when they had different displays in certain states. I think Oklahoma was one of them, if I recall correctly.
Was this the nativity scenes?
Florida, I believe, had the nativity scene. Oklahoma, I think, was just they just had like a big cross at one of their state buildings or something like that.
Or the Ten Commandments, probably, some sort of nonsense like that.
So wherever there was some sort of display with regard to another religion or any religion, they would come in there and say, well, we would like our Baphomet statue to be placed here. And then they spent, I don't know, thousands of dollars having a really fancy looking Baphomet statue. That's the goat-headed man, basically, if you're not sure who Baphomet is.
I couldn't tell you more besides that. All of these figures have some sort of mythology or history attached to them, and obviously we don't believe any of this stuff is actually true. However, it's interesting, right? Like I named my music studio the Amdusius Music Studio after the quote-unquote demon of music. There isn't a demon of music, but it sort of loosely translates to that, but that doesn't mean that any Satanist out there is running around praying to Amdusius or believing that this entity exists.
Well, right, and there's a lot of mythology surrounding Satanism, but most of it isn't true. I mean, in the 1980s or whatever, there was a lot of fear that was being spread about Satanists in the woods doing child sacrifices or sacrificing animals or whatever. And I don't think there was ever any kind of justification for that.
There was no justification for it, and despite the fact that these rumors still persist today, when people are like, we're secretly run by a group of child-eating Satanists or whatever people believe, there has never been a single shred of evidence supporting any of these accusations or any links these people might have to Satanism, ever.
Yeah, and I'm sure as we'll get into here, Satanism is, as I understand it, and I'm not a member of the Satanic Church, but being close to you and learning about it through your explanations and such on the air here, it seems to be a very humanistic viewpoint, focusing on individualism, or at least that's your view of how it should be, right?
And I mean, that's what the Church of Satan's view is as well. The difference is that, like Christians, they say one thing and then they do something completely different. So they wouldn't dispute with me.
I'm shocked. A religion with hypocrites in it?
I know, right? Huh. But they wouldn't argue with me when we talk about the individual sovereignty and one's body, one ultimately controlling one's body and being a good person, being moral, all of these things. They wouldn't dispute any of this. They would agree entirely, and then they would go and do the exact opposite.
Like by advocating for government programs or something
universally
like that.
Advocating for government. And like no part of anything Anton LaVey ever wrote suggested that you could achieve a good end with evil means.
But
in fact, that runs counter to almost all of Satanism. Evil begets evil.
And it kind of reminds me of our co-host who unfortunately could not join us tonight, Mark Edge. He's on the road or something like that. But he is a Quaker, and he goes to Quaker meeting. And when he's up here in New Hampshire, I don't know if they have it down in Honduras where he is, but I mean, you can have a Quaker meeting anywhere you want, right? Like you don't need to have a group. But he does go to the Quaker meetings up here, and it's mostly full of liberals. Who the Quakers are purportedly anti-slavery. They were the first people who were against slavery, at least openly against slavery. Yeah, they have a really excellent history in that way, and they're purportedly pro-peace, right? So how can you be anti-slavery and pro-peace and yet support government anything, right? Yet they do, of course. So
unfortunately,
again, they don't see the coercion. They don't see the evil that is involved in supporting the state. Anyway, let's get into the news here, because it is in the news. The so-called Global Order of Satan
An order that I've never heard of prior to tonight, so I cannot tell you what they believe or how they're different from anything that I say.
We'll learn a little bit about it. It is UK based, so I don't know how, maybe they have some chapters in the United States, but like you, this is the first I've heard of them as well.
You said Global Order of Satan?
That is what they're calling themselves. GOOS. Yeah, I guess you're right. Global Order of Satan UK, GUSU. Quote, with our rituals, there's never any murder, there's never any sacrifice, there's never any blood rites to Satan. We don't worship the devil, we don't cast magic spells, unquote. This is from, by the way, a story from The Telegraph over in the UK. In fact, as the Global Order of Satan UK, as well as other leaders and members of satanic groups around the world insist, it would be difficult to spot a Satanist walking down the street. Now, you don't have your pentagram on tonight, but there are some...
I alternate necklaces randomly based on which one I happen to see on a given day. But yeah, I do have. Well, I still have the giant pentagram tattooed on my back.
On your back, okay.
That's not visible in the winter because it's cold here, and I'm generally wearing a jacket. The only thing that I would dispute there, and not knowing anything about the Global Order of Satan. There's probably some of them that do believe in black magic and witchcraft and casting spells and stuff like that.
Okay.
There's a lot of overlap between Satanism and occultism and Wicca. Particularly.
What percentage would you say of a given satanic group would be into casting a spell?
I don't know, probably fairly low, 2 to 3%. Enough to exist and to need to be recognized and pointed out, but not like a driving force or a main force. Probably it's people who go a little bit further down the road of astrology.
I see.
They don't necessarily believe they can wave a magic wand and, Wingardium Leviosa somebody into the sky. That's a Harry Potter reference.
Okay, thanks. I didn't know.
Yeah, that was what they said to make things float.
Gotcha.
So they don't necessarily believe that, but they do believe that you can you can chant some series of magical words and make some gestures and combine it with some reagents or salt or whatever and somehow manifest that in the world. And I don't necessarily disagree with it because any thought that you put out there in the universe has the potential to be ultimately made manifest just by your desire and you're putting that out there. But I don't think, lighting the candle and chanting a sentence in Latin 5 times is necessarily going to achieve anything.
Yeah, I question whether or not a spell can affect another human being in any sort of positive or negative manner, and I'm a skeptic when it comes to that. But while the macabre rituals, occult rituals, virgin sacrifices, chalices of blood, and belief in the actual devil are a thing of the past, Satanism is luring increasing numbers of young people disillusioned with so-called outdated and dogmatic traditional religions to join its fold by offering an alternative to stuffy traditional faiths. They're putting a bunch of those words in quotes.
This is why Anton LaVey was so big on the religious imagery and all of these symbols and the ritualistic nature of it. Things that the Reformed Satanic Church doesn't really care for, that it appeals to people in an almost animalistic way where it just replaces one theology, the Christian and all of their symbols and their songs and their hymns and their chants and stuff with a completely different set that instead alludes to Satan. I'm not a fan of it because I think it's better to not have these traditions and these...
So wait, he does that even though they purportedly don't actually believe in Satan, the entity?
Right. The ritual aspects of it, of having the meeting and, everyone wearing black cloaks.
Mass.
That sort of thing. It was important to Anton LaVey.
I see. As upside down crosses?
Yes.
Okay.
And, I like the symbols too, but not necessarily for that reason. The ritualistic aspects of it, I don't care anything for.
The Sunday Telegraph spoke to leaders and members of satanic groups around the world who claim that the opportunities Satanism offers to people to engage in activism and campaign on issues such as gender and sexuality is part of the appeal for the younger members, particularly those who are increasingly less likely to declare themselves as Christian. Chaplain Leopold, a 32-year-old London-based undertaker, co-runs the Global Order of Satan UK, which he says has seen a 200% increase in membership over the last 5 years.
Nice. Good for them.
He says, I'd love to be able to claim that we could pat ourselves on the back and say, yes, we've done our infernal work here, and we're successfully declining the number of Christians, but I think it's a far more complex issue than that, he says. He thinks that 2 factors were responsible, the decreasing popularity of the traditional dogmatic religions and, quote, a movement towards self-identification and self-realization. He said further, this is particularly...
But that is a decline of Christianity. I mean, part of the whole thing about Christianity and what it was trying to do was make everyone equal before God. Not individuals, but like more homogenized. You're just a blob of souls before God, largely indistinguishable. And Satanism is very much about individualism and not being that. So I don't know how they could say that one expressing oneself's true identity and exploring oneself's true identity isn't also a decline in Christianity, because from what I can tell, the two things are inextricably related.
He says it's particularly amongst younger people who don't want to be identified as part of a prescriptive dogmatic religion and rather want to identify as their own self-beliefs and self-realization, which he says is what Satanism offers. So we often say that we're sort of the religion for those who don't like the oppression of previous religions. Well, I mean, there are a lot of options that are like that. I mean, there's a lot of sort of New Age things that are out there. I'm a panentheist, for instance. There are a lot of people who are turning away from organized religion in general, and many of them are not in the need of a church to join, per se. They just go off in their own direction. They do their own looking within and their own research and finding out what's out there and then selecting for themselves, a belief system that fits themselves. That's essentially what I have done. But some people do want to have a group they can join, right? So there's
the community thing is important, right? I mean, we have that
for a lot of people.
We have that here in New Hampshire among the libertarian community, but that's sort of unique in that regard. Most of the communities that you see, like the New Hampshire libertarians, are actually like religious ones. The closest analogy I can think of to the New Hampshire libertarians is like the church that I grew up in, and how everyone knew each other and everyone would help each other. They had these weekly gatherings where they just hung out and talked and had a good time, and everyone got along. And that's, if they don't have that among libertarians in New Hampshire, because they're not libertarians in New Hampshire, they're Satanists in the United Kingdom, and they're not getting that from any other church, then they just don't have that sense of community.
Yeah, you're right. That is definitely important for people, and to some extent, the freedom migration here to New Hampshire, I mean, I'm not going to say it's a religion, but it definitely is a moral group, right? Like, it's a group of people who have a very stern, principle that they adhere to, and that is the non-aggression principle, the idea that it is not okay to use aggressive force to achieve your goals in life, whether they be political or some other kind of goal, social, whatever. That's the one thing that binds those people together and creates that kind of instant community. So maybe that's one reason why a lot of them don't find themselves going off looking for a church, because they've got that built-in community here already as soon as they show up, possibly.
That would be my guess.
Yeah. Leopold says here that many young people are turning away from what are now incredibly outdated, very obviously stuffy views that are completely not in keeping with modern times.
No, Christianity's so far behind the cultural zeitgeist at this point that it's not even worth laughing about.
Yep, and then they get into some of the numbers here. In fact, I had a whole other story about this, but it looks like they're going to cover similar ground about how U.S. churches, for instance, are on the decline. That's the other story that I have from The Guardian. But his comments come as Christianity battles to appeal to younger generations and remains divided on the issue of gay marriage, with bishops preparing for a historic vote on the matter next month.
See, Christians are still arguing about gay marriage. Well,
right.
They're still stuck in the mid-90s, man. The rest of the world has moved on to larger issues, and homosexual marriage was decided 30 years ago, or close to 30 years ago.
Well, and there have been some churches that have been more open-minded on this issue. For instance, the Unitarians, of course, have been for a long time welcoming towards gays. Now, they're not per se a Christian church. They're an interfaith church. But there's also, here in town, there's what do they call themselves? The UCC, and the U doesn't stand for Unitarian. It's something else. I'm not recalling.
Well, there's also smaller churches like the Next Level Church. They interviewed me when I ran for sheriff. They probably were among the first to be accepting of LGBTQ people.
Okay.
I don't know that they were among the first, but they're certainly accepting of them now.
Yeah. You didn't feel like they were rude to you or something
no,
like that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And the Catholic Church here in Keene, at least one of them has an LGBTQ pride rainbow flag outside of their building. So not all churches, certainly, and not all denominations of Christianity, but there are a ton of denominations of Christianity, many of which disagree with each other. Well, all of which disagree with each other. That's why there are so many different denominations. and you can't really say, well, this is what Christianity believes or this is what Christianity doesn't believe. Beyond going
different.
beyond going directly to the Bible, and good luck pinning down what the Bible actually has to say about anything, because someone's just going to come along and say, oh no, but if you look at the actual ancient Hebrew,
mistranslated,
it actually says this, and you can't prove that or disprove it.
Unless you can read the Hebrew, then you don't really know.
Right. But in which case, I'm just taking their word for it, and I don't know that I can do that either.
Yeah, and you do have to wonder if the declining number of people that is going to church in the United States, and I'm pretty sure elsewhere in the world, is one of the reasons why they're opening up, right? Like, oh crap, we're losing members, so maybe we should vote on allowing the gays to come in, right? So like, okay, we're okay with you guys now. Come on in. We need your 10% of your tithe.
It's almost like the Republicans, man. It's almost like they're similar in ideology, the Christians. Or the stodgy Christians, because I don't want to wash all Christians like this, because I know some great Christians who are pro-LGBT and so on. But when I think of a Christian, I don't think about people like Tom Knapp, who writes at the Garrison Center, or these upstanding Christians who are friendly to gay people and trans people. I think of like the church I grew up in, the Fire and Brimstone Southern Baptists, who are
in Mississippi.
Yes, who absolutely just voted for Donald Trump in 2020, and they're going to vote for him again in 2024. Assuming they don't vote for someone else because they got the Republican ticket. But the possibility of inviting in LGBTQ people or people who aren't white or whatever, and they won't say these things so clearly, but you look around and there's no LGBTQ people and there's only white people. They don't have to say, we don't like gay and black people in order to get that message across. There's none in sight.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder what it would be like if you showed up as the Aria of today at this church that you grew up in, and what would happen? Like, what would the reaction of people be?
Oh, man. I was down there for my father's funeral, too, back in, like, May. I would not object to going down there to find out.
As long as they don't nail you to the cross, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah, this was at a funeral, so they were far more gracious than they were extraordinarily gracious. But again, it was at my father's funeral, so they weren't going to start a fight with me then, or an argument with me, whatever.
I mean, they're not going to start a fight with you, likely,
not
if
physically,
you show up to church.
But I think they would take issue with my presence.
They might try to make it uncomfortable. Who knows? I
think they would ask me to leave. I really do. Because otherwise I'm corrupting their children. I'm exposing their children to the existence of trans people, and then just by looking at me, a mere glance at me can undo the 15 years of strong Christian upbringing.
Because it's that good of a philosophy. MSN.com, and this story here at the Telegraph continues. So looking at the statistics, right? How many people are Christian versus Satanist? According to the Office for National Statistics, now this is just the UK they're looking at, published in November, the number of people in England and Wales identifying as Satanists saw a 167% increase between 2011 and 2021.
No, I'm confused. It mentioned a 200% increase earlier, so that means it doubled or tripled. Because 200% of 100... Right,
100% would be a doubling.
Right, but 200%, it would generally be a tripling, but I doubt that's what they meant.
Well, the numbers are actually 1,893 up to 5,054.
Oh, wow, they meant tripling. Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. Not quite tripling.
But pretty close,
2.5 or whatever. At the same time, the number of Christians dropped so low, they now account for less than half of England and Wales's population for the first time in census history.
Oh, so they're finally not the majority.
Well, they probably are still the largest religion, but they're no longer half of the population.
They're a plurality now.
Yeah, I would guess that's accurate. There's more coming up here. You can join us, and you can share your thoughts on the shifting tides of religions. It's Free Talk Live. Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here. And I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Classified documents have been found at the home of former US Vice President Mike Pence. It comes after sensitive documents were also found at the residencies of President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. US correspondent William Denslow reports.
The former Vice President's lawyer Greg Jacobs says a small number of classified documents were inadvertently boxed and transported to Mike Pence's personal residence at the end of the Trump presidency. His legal team says they were discovered last week, and Pence says he was unaware these documents existed and understands the importance of protecting sensitive information. President Joe Biden is also facing scrutiny for his handling of such materials after classified documents were found at his residences or former offices on 4 occasions. Around 300 documents, some marked as top secret, were also found last year at Donald Trump's primary residence at Mar-a-Lago. The Department of Justice has appointed special counsels to investigate the current and former president.
There is still no commitment from the United Nations Security Council members to send a multinational security force to Haiti. Gang-related violence has intensified there, leaving several police officers dead and blocking aid from entering the country. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
It's a critical time for Haiti, says its representative to the United Nations. Antonio Rodriguez says the gang violence is out of control, with police officers being killed almost daily. He is continuing the call to the UN to deploy a multinational force to assist with the security situation there. But there's no concrete commitments from member states. The UK says it's open to further discussions, while Japan says it will continue to support the Haitian Police Department. Meanwhile, the UN reports that murders are up by 1/3 since last year, and close to 5 million people are facing acute hunger across the country.
And nominations for the Oscars have been released, with several blockbusters in with a chance of winning Best Picture. Our US correspondent Sally Patterson has more details.
The countdown has begun to one of Hollywood's most glamorous events. 8 films received 5 or more Oscar nominations. Everything Everywhere All at Once led the way with 11. It's a record-setting year for performers of Asian descent, but advocacy group Women in Film condemned the Oscars for its lack of female nominees in the Best Director category. The group accused Academy voters of not valuing women's voices. The Academy has not responded to the criticism. The Oscars will be broadcast on March the 12th, hosted by Jimmy Kimmel. Last year drew 16.6 million viewers, its second lowest figures on record.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show and you can bring up whatever you want. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Tonight it is Ian
and Arya.
We are talking about the rise of Satanism, at least among younger people, according to the Telegraph story that we're sharing. They're looking at, and they spoke to different satanic groups, including one we'd never heard of before, the Global Order of Satan, UK. And it is focusing on like some of the numbers and such coming from the UK, although I do have a story about Christianity on the decline in the United States as well.
Yeah, and as I said during the break, I can't even pretend to be sad about this. I mean, I like Christianity from the mythological perspective and the stories of Jesus. I like it in the same way that I like Harry Potter.
Okay.
And I find that the stories have some value for that reason alone. However, there is a lot of blood on Christians' hands.
Sure.
And you can't separate Christianity, the ideology, from that violent, bloody, abusive, oppressive history.
I mean, you can separate your own church and say, we're not okay with that, right? Like, hey, we didn't do that. That wasn't it wasn't what the founder taught, right? And you can do the same thing with Islam as well. I mean, there's peace-loving Muslims out there, and there's also bloodthirsty ones.
Well, it wasn't what the founder. Well, it depends on what you mean by founder.
Jesus. Is what I meant.
But Jesus didn't actually start a religion. Paul did.
That's true.
And what Paul started was a bloody, violent, tyrannical thing.
Yeah. All right.
But Paul did stray tremendously from the teachings of Christ, as far as I can tell. And I think a lot of modern Christians would agree with that assessment. I don't know. But to me, I have a hard time separating Christianity from its violent past. And I think that they need to come to terms with that past.
I don't know if that's the reason why people are dropping away from Christianity, or it's more of what it's doing today, the fact that it hasn't caught up to the present, as we were talking about earlier. It's not welcoming of all types of people, etc. But the numbers are definitely going down, and we can talk about that coming up. But first, let's go to Major Payne. You're on Free Talk Live, calling from Michigan. Go ahead. Oh, stand by, Major. Now we have you. Go ahead. We can hear you now.
You guys are confusing Catholicism and Christianity.
I don't know if we
You mean Protestantism?
Well, I mean, think about it. You say we got blood on our hands. Any institution of people this large trying to hold on to just their own backyard is going to have a lot of blood on their hands. I mean, this has been going on for centuries.
There's been very little.
What ain't theirs.
Okay.
And that goes for the Muslims and everybody else.
I understand, Major, but let me remind you that there's been very little of Christianity's history where they were trying to hold on to their land. The vast majority of Christianity's history has been taking land from others violently.
Well, and the same thing is held true with the Muslim Empire. They're nothing but conversion.
Yeah, I'm also not.
That's their main goal. And
we'd probably be more critical of the Muslims if we grew up with those people, but both Arya and I grew up Christian, so that's what we're familiar with.
I mean, I don't know either because I didn't grow up in that backyard. But you guys mentioned the separation of church and state earlier.
Yeah.
And I think what you got to take into concept on that is our founding fathers were run out of England because of religious persecution. You know, the Huguenots and whatnot, and
I'm not convinced that's true.
That whole thing, there's never been a law written into the government about the separation of church and state. The only time that was ever mentioned was in a letter from Jefferson to, I think, Washington, but it might have been Adams. He did a lot of correspondence with Adams, too.
Well, there is a principle involved, right, Major? The principle of why a lot of the people came here from the UK was to get away from the state religion. Isn't that true?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's what they said. Like I said, I'm not convinced it's true.
Well, some of them started their own state religion when they got here, but they definitely wanted to get away from that version of whatever the state wanted to force down people's throats.
And that was the separation between church and state. State cannot control the church. And it's been
that lasted about 4 days in North America, from what I can tell. Maybe a little longer than 4 days, but I mean, the Salem witch trials, they basically landed in North America and almost immediately got started on the Salem witch trials.
The Salem witch trials were caused because they were eating rotten rye at the end of the winter, and there was LSD in it.
I have heard that hypothesis.
The whole damn town was tripping.
Yeah, I've heard that hypothesis, but I also...
Somebody to bloodlet. I can't explain it.
Anytime I've been on LSD, I've never wanted to kill anyone. I mean, normally it's like everybody, all is one and we're all in this together, right? Like everything's connected. I just wouldn't. It's hard to believe that would be a thing for people, but I mean, maybe for psychopaths, that's what would happen to them.
Well, they didn't realize they was tripping. They didn't have a trip guide, and these were all God-fearing people, and they're like, "Oh my God, the devil's amongst us." Nobody's got a clue what's going on.
Yeah, good point. Don't give a crazy person LSD.
No, but it's important to point out that what Major is talking about, there is a hypothesis that there was some LSD was leaking into the water for some reason. I don't remember all of the specifics, but
it was rotten rye. It was the end of the winter.
But you're saying it like it's a fact, and it's not. It's a hypothesis that one historian conceived and wrote about. But it's not universally accepted by any means.
Nothing is universally accepted by any means, is it?
That's probably true. Thank you, Major, for the call tonight. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. So we were talking about the number of Satanists is up, according to the equivalent of their census over there in the UK, up 167% between the years 2011 and 2021, up from 1,893 to 5,054. And then they bring up the fact that the number of Christians has now dropped so low, they now account for less than half of England and Wales's population for the first time in census history. So I got a little more detail on that.
Are they lumping Catholics and Protestants together? No.
It appears they are.
Okay.
I'm just judging based here by some bar graphs that I've pulled up here from the Telegraph on a story from November about the census data that had come in. They compare 2001, 2011, and 2021. They look at the numbers as far as what were people's religious beliefs at that time. And back in 2001, Christianity, of course, they're not labeling it, so that doesn't help very much. Oh, there it is. Okay, so yeah, there's a label. So it looks like Christianity was roughly a little less than 75% of the population in the UK in 2001. And then
See, that's why they shouldn't lump Catholicism and Protestantism in the same group. And you generally don't see that in surveys and stuff in the United States. But it weights because there's huge differences between. It's almost like saying Protestant or Christians and Muslims are the same, to say that Catholics and Protestants are the same, because there's such a huge disconnect between what the two sides are saying that I can't consider them the same religion.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know enough about the differences between Catholicism and Christianity. I couldn't tell you what they are.
Well, the main point is that Catholicism is all about you reaching God through the church apparatus, through the bishop and the priest and the pope, all the way up, right?
Okay.
Whereas Protestantism, it's more about establishing a direct connection to God, where there is no interceding person.
Okay, but do the Catholics believe that Jesus is the Son of God?
Yes.
That's a key. Okay. That's like a key factor as to why they would be considered Christian in my mind. Now,
sure,
you are delineating a key difference between them, but if we start going into the differences between them, then we should whittle all the Christian branches down as well, because they all have, major differences in how they baptize you or whatever other things that they believe. So I get why they could lump it together. Whereas the Muslims, for instance, do not believe that Jesus was the Son of God. They believe he was a prophet.
Right,
one of a myriad of prophets that has come forth. So that's another major thing that separates them and Christianity is they believe in a monotheistic God instead of the triune God that the Christians believe in. Right?
But I would love a Christian to call in and try to explain this to me. But do Christians really believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Because as I understand,
say they do.
Well, they say that, but they also say that he is God, right? And it comes into what the hell is the Trinity really supposed to mean? The Holy Trinity of God, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. What the hell is this, right? Do you truly believe that Jesus is God's Son if he's also God? I mean, please explain this to me.
Okay, I would love for someone to explain that. The number here is 603-283-6160. We'll get you right on the air here. We don't really do phone screening much anymore. It's because our long segments, we don't have staff. We will just literally take your call and put you on the air. So if you got an answer for Aria, 603-283-6160. So it went from just under 75% in 2001. 10 years later to 2011, it is 59.3% of the UK population was quote-unquote Christian. And then in 2021, that number had dropped to 46.2%. So a very, very low number.
Almost 30% inside of a single generation, it sounds like, or from one generation to the next.
Yeah, it's down significantly. And so, yeah. So then
It's good news.
What they actually show here also is that, surprisingly, the numbers of other religions are actually growing. So the number of Muslims in the UK is up. I mean, it's not jumping up or anything like that, but it is up. The number of...
Well, of course. I mean, people still have to have some sort of religious excuse to justify their bigotry, right? And if they don't want to associate with Christianity because it's on the decline, well, they just pick another religion that historically has a lot of bigotry in it.
Another one here, Hindu is up slightly.
That's mostly positive, I would suggest.
Buddhists are up slightly as well.
Tremendously positive.
But the biggest group that is growing the most is those who identify with, quote-unquote, no religion. And that number has... It looks like it's been absorbing most of the Christians. They're not going from Christianity to another religion per se, or at least another organized religion. Because there is another group here that says religion not stated, and curiously, that number has actually been going down as well over time. Again, we're just looking at the UK numbers here.
And as you mentioned, a person can be spiritual without necessarily being religious. So these people who are turning away from Christianity, they're not necessarily going, okay, well, there is no God then, because that's what Christians tend to believe. If you don't believe in the Christian God, then you must not believe in any God. But no, they believe in some sort of God. It just doesn't fall within the scope of the Christian God.
Yeah, well, I mean, you bring up an interesting kind of debate is like, can you be spiritual without being religious? And I don't know if you can. I kind of feel like they're one and the same. I understand why people don't like the word religion, because it does concoct these ideas of these quote-unquote stuffy, old, organized systems that have been oppressive for so long. So I understand why someone would want to jettison that. But ultimately, all a religion is just a certain set of beliefs that one has and purportedly applies as well in one's life in regards to the nature of the universe and God.
I think I would agree with that. You can't be spiritual without being religious, I think. I don't see any reason I would argue with it, except, as you point out, the connotations of the word religious. It just sort of makes my skin crawl.
Yeah, I don't think it requires a dogma. I don't think it requires, some sort of rote memorization or 10 Commandments or anything like that. It can just simply be your own personal belief system. But if you want to comment, you can join us here. The number is 603-283-6160. So back to the story about the Satanists.
I think religion also has a definition that... You have to actually go out there and like proselytize, I think, in order for it to count. Okay.
No, definitely not. I can pull it up here in a little bit. But so the census revealed an uptick in other less traditional religions. The number of pagans is up from 56,000 and change to 73,000, as well as the rise in the number of animists who believe that all natural things have a soul. And those the animists increased from 500 something to over 800.
That's a curious ideology. All natural things have a soul. I mean, I'm assuming this means like trees and grass and stuff.
And animals. There's some people who believe that only humans have souls.
Right. Well, that's just ego.
Yeah,
that's just humans looking around the universe and going, well, we look identical to everything else and we act identically to everything else, and we're scientifically proven to be 99% linked to everything else, but we're special.
We're special, yeah. It's like, if you believe in the idea of a soul, and personally, I like the idea of a soul, and you can somehow look at your dog and think it doesn't have a soul, is like beyond me. Like that
is sad.
They clearly have their own agency. They clearly are unique little creatures. They're all different, right? Like in their own unique ways.
I'm thinking about my special little golden retriever, man. She's super special. But you raise an interesting question. What does one mean by soul? Because I know that I will continue existing until the end of time, until not dark energy, until the universe dies in either a freeze or an explosion. The atoms that make me up will continue to exist, but the singular entity that is me will not continue to exist. And what me is there really? Is it just a combination of these atoms reacting in a certain way? Or is there some other thing that we can't easily measure or quantify?
Right. Consciousness cannot, at this point in time, be measured by science. They don't even have an explanation for, as I understand it, they have no explanation for what consciousness is.
No, and these are the same people. The people who say this want to then turn around and say, oh, no, look, Lambda definitely has no consciousness. Right. We don't know what consciousness is, but
we know you don't have it.
Definitely not that.
Right. Let's go to the phone calls here. You're on the air, caller. What's your name? You're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, it's Tom. Hi. Well, so where do I begin? I think I wanted to answer the question about the triune God first, maybe. But before I get into that, I would say this, and I've combated this, if you recall. I'm a Christian anarchist, right? So I get it coming from both sides. From the Christians, I'm some libtard, and then from my fellow anarchists, I'm some wacky Christian guy. But anywho, when I hear those criticisms that Christianity has blood on its hands, I have to remind you that when that occurs, the majority of the time, you have an infusion of the state with religion, and that's where the blood comes from. The blood, really, the machine of corpses is the state. Those bring in the military powers for the church to utilize. That doesn't absolve them of that immorality of enforcing violence or using violence to get their the means to an end. But if you take the state away, the religion is the religious institution is powerless. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but it's fundamentally wrong. The reason that this I'm explaining. The reason this union between church and state came about in the first place was because the church was becoming more and more powerful. The church, you could love your king and all of that great stuff and be loyal to the king, but the church commanded a person's soul. They commanded this special kind of loyalty that no king or prince could intervene in. So these two entities, they were competing with one another, and ultimately the church. Okay. Well, I guess if you wanted me to answer your question, I could have, but go ahead.
Well, I get your point, but the thing is fundamentally, as far as Christian, I can't speak for any other religion, but Christianity, that was operating in opposition to Christ's teaching. The one thing that Christ got insane about, smashing up the room, as it were, throwing chairs and tables, was the conversion of his quote-unquote father's house into a den of corruption, where they were taking advantage of people and whatnot. He was furious about this. So I would say that, like, you're right in that it does happen, but it happens in opposition to the fundamental teachings of that thing.
See, I agree with you there, Tom. I can't blame a Christian of today who is a principled individual. As Tom sounds like he's a liberty-minded guy. I can't blame them for what their ancestors did.
I've never said that any Christian living today had blood on their hands.
Oh, okay.
I said that Christianity does.
Well, no, Christianity itself, you can, if you separate the instances of corruption and violence from the teachings itself, they're clearly opposed. It's not murky. Like when you start actually studying biblical text, and all of the church history and all of that stuff, the story really just shows that people are corruptible, man, and that's like the overall
that's true of all of the religions, the world religions basically, certainly the major ones that had some sort of great leader at one time or a founder, and then fell away from that person's teachings. I mean, it's certainly true in Buddhism, it's true in Islam. And so on. So let's get back to the original question that you said you were going to answer, which was the question about the Son of God. Arya said earlier that it's her understanding, having been raised in a Christian church in the South, Arya, that Christians seem to be of two mindsets about Jesus. On one hand, they call him the Son of God, but on the other hand, they call him God. So can you clear that up?
Yeah, I'll try to. I'm a bit rusty. It's been a few years since I've been out of No, I'm just kidding. I haven't been. But so there's a fundamental misunderstanding, and I think that comes from a lot of imagery that has been adopted in mainstream media of like what God is and what hell is. Like we get like this depiction of hell from Dante's Inferno, and there's that's a complete fabrication of fiction. And I mean, it's a great book, but it doesn't actually.
The whole idea of hell is a fabrication, but you're probably not going to agree with me on that. So go ahead. What's the point about?
Sorry. Outside the confines of actual biblical scripture, what is understood as Dante's Inferno is not. So it's not actually a proper definition.
Okay, but about the Jesus question. About the Jesus question. Let's focus on that.
Right. So in a similar way, like, you're watching Monty Python's Holy Grail, right? You get this like dude in the sky with a beard and all that stuff. It's fun. but it's actually I don't know what would you describe it. It's just kind of like a fairy tale version of trying to kind of put an image to something that we can't really explain without hours and hours and hours of discussion. And I know that's a weak answer, but
it was a non-answer.
Yeah, you haven't even answered the question at all. I mean, what do Christians actually believe about? Tell me if I'm asking this question wrong, Arya. Is it what do Christians like you believe about Jesus? Is he the Son of God, or is he God, or can you be both? What's the answer there?
That's exactly how I would ask it.
So Jesus is referred to as Logos, or the Word, in the Bible. So you can think of like your words being like proceeding from your mouth, being like an essence of yourself, but also like the child of you, as it were. I'm not making much sense on that, but it's kind of like your product.
Well, let me re-explain the question then, right?
Your word is your product as well.
Because, I'm Arya DeMezzo, right? And that makes sense. And when people say, look, there's Arya. But now, if someone was to say, no, you're Arya and you're Arya's kid, well, there's obviously a bit of a problem here. So I need that explained to me.
That's what I was trying to say, is like there's a lot of nuance here, and there's a lot of textual criticism that goes on with this, and understanding how languages works. And translational, not problems necessarily, but like just condensing it down to one word. It was never intended to do that. That's why we have sermons to kind of unpack these ideas.
What was never intended to do?
Are you saying that Jesus is not the Son of God?
I am not saying that at all.
Are you saying that Jesus is not God?
Look.
Those are two really simple questions, man.
Well, it could be both, right? Like from my perspective, Tom.
In trying to, sorry.
Jesus is both. Okay, Jesus is God, and Jesus is also the Son of God, in the same way that we're all sons and daughters of God, because, from my perspective as a pantheist, I think we're all connected to, and we're all a part of that God. So is Jesus both, or is he one or the other?
It's a lot of equivocations of the word son. And some languages have a bunch of definitions of the word love, or different versions of the word love. We condense it down to one word. So it's difficult to say, well, it's like the son being a product, or the son being a child, or, that kind of a thing. Like, it gets difficult.
Dude, you've had minutes to answer this question at this point, and you have not made it any more clear, speaking of equivocation. So you have no clear way to answer this simple question.
It's not a simple question. I tried to.
Okay.
It's pretty damn simple, man.
Thank you for the call, Tom. I do appreciate your attempt, at least.
I do appreciate it as
explaining your beliefs.
I want to be fair to the Christians. I know this is people have dedicated their lives to understanding this question, but okay, then explain it to someone.
Both seems like the best answer to me, but that's apparently not right, according to him. There's more coming up here in moments. You can join the show. Hour number 2 is on the way. This is Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. So you've signed the Shire Society Declaration and are planning your move to New Hampshire to be around more liberty-oriented people. Next, sign up for the Shire Society Forum at forum.shiresociety.com. There are a bunch of people there who are already in the Shire, and they want to meet you. If you're already in the Shire physically, you should also come by the forums. Remember, not everyone uses Facebook. New people are signing up for the Shire Society Forum every month, so drop in and say hello at forum.shiresociety.com. Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Classified documents have been found at the home of former US Vice President Mike Pence. It comes after sensitive documents were also found at the residencies of President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. US correspondent William Denslow reports.
The former Vice President's lawyer Greg Jacobs says a small number of classified documents were inadvertently boxed and transported to Mike Pence's personal residence at the end of the Trump presidency. His legal team says they were discovered last week, and Pence says he was unaware these documents existed and understands the importance of protecting sensitive information. President Joe Biden is also facing scrutiny for his handling of such materials after classified documents were found at his residences or former offices on 4 occasions. Around 300 documents, some marked as top secret, were also found last year at Donald Trump's primary residence at Mar-a-Lago. The Department of Justice has appointed special counsels to investigate the current and former president.
There is still no commitment from the United Nations Security Council members to send a multinational security force to Haiti. Gang-related violence has intensified there, leaving several police officers dead and blocking aid from entering the country. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
It's a critical time for Haiti, says its representative to the United Nations. Antonio Rodriguez says the gang violence is out of control, with police officers being killed almost daily. He is continuing the call to the UN to deploy a multinational force to assist with the security situation there. But there's no concrete commitments from member states. The UK says it's open to further discussions, while Japan says it will continue to support the Haitian Police Department. Meanwhile, the UN reports that murders are up by 1/3 since last year, and close to 5 million people are facing acute hunger across the country.
And nominations for the Oscars have been released, with several blockbusters in with a chance of winning Best Picture. Our US correspondent Sally Patterson has more details.
The countdown has begun to one of Hollywood's most glamorous events. 8 films received 5 or more Oscar nominations. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once led the way with 11. It's a record-setting year for performers of Asian descent, but advocacy group Women in Film condemned the Oscars for its lack of female nominees in the Best Director category. The group accused Academy voters of not valuing women's voices. The Academy has not responded to the criticism. The Oscars will be broadcast on March the 12th, hosted by Jimmy Kimmel. Last year drew 16.6 million viewers, its second lowest figures on record.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more depth at the news that India may have overtaken China to become the world's most populous nation. As we reported last week, the World Population Review says India, with 1.42 billion people, is now home to 5 million more than China. That's partly due to a decline in China's population of 850,000 last year, the first time that's happened since the 1960s.
The idea that India can claim the largest country in the world is important for their own self-image.
Dr. Adnan Nasimullah directs the India Institute at King's College London and says the news does not necessarily support Indian government hopes that the country's economy will soon outpace China's.
China's economy in per capita terms is about 6 times the size of India's. They've had very different histories of industrialization and sort of centralization. India is going to grow and eventually will become one of the world's largest economies, but it's still a very poor country. Most of the Indian economy is still sort of relatively within relatively low productivity activities. China is effectively an almost completely industrialized country.
But the Confederation of Indian Industry forecasts that India can grow to a $40 trillion economy by the year 2047 if it uses its young workforce effectively. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our main news again. Classified documents have been found at the home of former US Vice President Mike Pence. There's still no commitment from the United Nations Security Council to send a multinational security force to Haiti. Gang-related violence has intensified there. And nominations for the Oscars have been released, with several blockbusters in with a chance of winning Best Picture. And that's the latest feature story news. Kate Fisher reporting.
A reclusive deity hasn't written a new book in 2,000 years, and a local rescue dog is adopted for a couple weeks. This is the Onion Week in Review. This week, in a devastating blow to the nation's laundry, 16,000 Americans were reportedly stained during the messiest day in U.S. history. Reports confirm that nearly 3,000 citizens received permanent stains on their good shirt from mustard splatter off a dropped hot dog, along with 12,000 cases of spilled coffee and other dark beverages, ruining Americans' pair of hand-wash-only pants. Government officials further indicated that federal assistance for the nation's overwhelmed dry cleaners would be necessary. And in this week's local news, an elderly Rite Aid patron stretches out a conversation about toothpaste to prolong human contact. In other news, artifacts discovered buried in Washington, D.C. suggest humans once passed laws there. A self-centered child blames his parents' divorce entirely on himself. And a night of uninterrupted sleep really throws off a man's entire day.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. It is Free Talk Live. You can join the show here and bring up whatever you want. We're kicking off the second hour talking about world religions and a rise in popularity, apparently, of the satanic churches out there, at least according to The Telegraph, which is looking at the numbers, at least in the UK. I don't know if they have numbers for the US, but in a lot of cases, what's true in the UK tends to be mirrored to some extent in the United States. We are seeing that fewer people are identifying with Christianity as well. It's not just the Satanists that are on the rise. Other religions are increasing their numbers, but the number of people who describe themselves as no religion is also going up, more so than probably any other. So it's Ian and Arya in the studio here tonight, but also our phones are open. That means you can call in and talk about anything you want. Coming up, though, the Chat GPT, the latest on this so-called artificial intelligence. It continues to be in the news. It's a big deal.
It's hard not to talk about it.
Yep, and you've got a story about it, Arya, about possibly putting writers out of business, which is kind of what ChatGPT does. It writes things. Yes. You can give it an assignment, and it'll crank it out in less than a minute, I think, in most cases. So we'll talk about that coming up here, and let's first go to your phone calls and thoughts, though. Robert is on the line, listening in Daytona Beach. Go ahead, Robert.
Hi, I'm glad to talk with you. I would like to address Aria. I was reading a book by a doctor, and this is medical doctor, psychology and all that. But the thing was, she discussed PARIS, a term called PARIS. It's an acronym for partial androgen receptor insensitivity syndrome.
Hold on, one more time. Partial androgen receptor
insensitivity
syndrome. Okay.
Yeah, and it means that at conception, the egg is got a genetic mutation that prevents it from developing completely when it's responding to a Y chromosome. And so what happens is the Y chromosome sends a signal, and the egg just does not develop, or the body ends up developing, and then the female is the dominant, default development.
So it's sort of like an explanation for the existence of intersex people, like XXY people and other intersex types. I don't know.
Yes, there's a physiology she claims in her book called The Story of Testosterone, the hormone that dominates and divides us.
Okay, hold on. Before we get too deep into this, as somebody who's kind of on the outside of this, I mean, yeah, Aria, you and I work together, but I don't know what an intersex person is. So can you explain that to me?
Yeah, sure. So everyone tends to have two chromosomes, chromosome pair, XX female or XY male. But in reality, we've learned that it's a little more complicated than that. And there's a lot of people running around. We don't know what percentage. I suspect it's probably like 1% or less than 1% who are XXY or maybe even XYY. I don't know, because I don't know all of the details about intersex, but it's an explanation for some people, like the black woman who is like a really good sprinter. They tested her for testosterone and they ended up kicking her out with just an ordinary cis woman, right?
Huh.
And part of the explanations put forward by people on the internet was that she's actually intersex and just doesn't know, and that's why she had such high levels of testosterone.
So just to clarify something, the XXY and what was the other one? Y.
I don't know that XYY is a thing.
XYY, whatever they are, the three chromosomes together. Can they have either genitals? I mean,
presumably.
Okay.
I don't think it has much to do with their actual anatomy.
So it doesn't show
thing,
per
right.
se in a certain way. Okay.
I believe so.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, and this author claims that it exactly has to do with anatomy. So this is maybe controversial in many circles. In fact, this person was petitioned against in her university to be thrown off the faculty because there's such controversy concerning her.
Wait, so this person said that the intersexism is related to anatomy? Is that right? It's hermaphroditism?
Not exactly. It's this developmental disorder where a person, her prime subject was a woman who was actually a male, but because of default.
So she was a trans man, I think, is what you're saying.
The default development order of her body or his body. She had all the attributes of a female body, but she had male organs, but they had not developed. They stayed inside of her.
Okay, hold on a second. When you say, I just want to clarify what you're saying here. When you say she had all of the attributes of a female body, but male organs were there, but they were inside of her. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, in the blood, it creates a disorder. This person had complete androgen insensitivity syndrome disorder. So she,
Jesus Christ.
Exactly
just pick
like
one.
A perfect female specimen.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a trans. I mean, did this person even suggest that she was in fact a man, or is this just they uncovered this by doing some other biological test on the person?
Good question.
Well, did biological testing on her to determine what her blood level of hormones was, and that she generated these male characteristics indicating that she had testes, not ovaries. They are able.
So just to clarify what you're saying here, you're saying this woman who had a vagina also had testicles inside of her somewhere instead of ovaries.
Yeah, and the ovaries did not ever appear in her body.
Okay, did they actually demonstrate this, or did they just test her testosterone level and say, "Wow, that's high. You must have a pair"?
This is very interesting. I found it fascinating, and it was a comfort to me to understand how doctors approach this condition. But this
so what did they do with this woman? Because I mean, if if she's got testicles inside of her, then there are procedures that could like definitively prove that. But it sounds like she's just saying, oh, well, her testosterone levels are high. She must, have testicles.
Yeah, which one is it?
Well, the doctors are offering to do operations on her to correct her, but she was comfortable in her own body the way it is. So,
but you still didn't answer the question. Maybe you don't know, which is fine. Does this woman have actual testicles inside of her, or are they just presuming that because she has a lot of testosterone?
No, they absolutely defined her testes, and that's
you said they defined?
That's different compared to her body. Her body was off in all other ways female.
Were they located in a different place besides where her ovaries would be?
See, in the development, in progress development, the testes actually descend into the abdomen, descend down. But in this resistant, androgen-resistant state condition, they do not descend. And so the default position, the default development progress of the body becomes female in all other ways.
Could she, so she has no ovaries, so she has no eggs.
Yeah,
but she does have testicles. Amazing.
Yeah.
It sounds to me, the way this call began, you suggested I might have this. It sounds like I could potentially have the exact opposite of this, but I assure you, I do have testicles.
Well,
and they did in fact descend.
It can. That's why it's a wide range of development anomalies, you could say, because of this. Exceptional.
Well, there you go. So the point of your call was to just simply bring up this Paris thing, bring it to our listeners and Aria's attention.
And let you know that it's a comfort to me to actually know this and understand the world a little better.
All right. Very good, Robert. Thanks for the call tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
The number here is 603-283-6160. Kind of hard to get a grasp on there in the beginning, but I think we kind of sussed out some of the important information. So
that's generally not how I expect calls to go when people want to call in and talk about gender and anatomy and stuff with me. I usually expect it to go a completely different direction.
Certainly an unusual discussion there. The number is 603-283-6160. We were talking about religion and the decline in Christianity, increases in the number of Satanists and other various different belief systems. According to The Telegraph over in the UK, they're looking at what they consider to be a wider trend. Dr. David Robertson, who's a lecturer on religious studies at the Open University, said, quote, "The appeal of a lot of new religions, including Satanism, is that they offer a form of religion that directly addresses the social issues that matter more to younger people, especially their willingness to be activists. And not only do they offer an opportunity for this sort of stuff to actively challenge laws, but also to appeal to the activists among the young people." Isn't that what he just said? Professor Linda Woodhead, head of the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at King's College, added that Satanism is a young person's religion, but that, quote, "the bigger phenomenon we're seeing is the incredible diversification of the religious and spiritual landscape." She says further, there's now a lot of solitary exploration, which is what I was discussing earlier, where somebody leaves a organized religion and then just figures out for themselves what their belief system is and should be.
I don't know that it's fair to say that Satanism is a young person's religion. Certainly, Satanism is a newer religion.
It's been around for less than, 100 years or something?
Certainly less than 100. I don't know exactly how long. I think LaVey was like early 50s, or Crowley maybe was 50s. I don't know the exact time frame, but it rose up around the prevailing cultural ideas of the day, the counter-cultural ideas of the day specifically, which was pro-tolerance, pro-love, in a lot of cases free love, and the hippie movement and stuff like that. That's the environment in which Satanism grew. And this stodgy, no, you can't be a man wearing a dress, you can't do drag shows, or you can't smoke pot, you can't do any of these things that Christians generally didn't want people to do, or just conservative Christian society in general didn't want people to do. Satanism rose in an era where there was a lot of pushback against that. And because of that, it encompasses a lot of the ideas that those countercultural movements took on. So that's going to appeal to people who are younger, but that's just because Satanism was born in that particular culture that caused it to have these to give it 500 years and Satanism is going to be a dinosaur like Christianity is today.
Could be. Yeah, it's hard to say what religion would look like, 500 years from now. Although Christianity is still very popular, right? Like it's still 46% of the people in the UK at the moment. They say further here there's a lot of solitary exploration, particularly with the internet, and you can find anything to fit your particular identity, interests, values, or beliefs. And that's an interesting point here because, and one of the reasons why Satanism is probably on the rise now, in the 50s or whatever, it would have only been able to be spread by word of mouth. There weren't going to be easily accessible information in any place about Satanism. You would have to hear about it from someone, and then maybe they'd give you a book, because the odds that you're going to be able to go down to Barnes & Noble or Amazon wouldn't exist, right? The local bookstore probably didn't carry the Satanic Bible, so you wouldn't be able to get any good information from any kind of source in the early days. Now you can, and that explains why they're seeing this sort of, what was the word that they used? Diversification of the religious and spiritual landscape, because now you're not locked in as easily to whatever your parents were, which is what a lot of people, that's how people grow up, right? Like your parents are a certain belief, they pass that on to you. Most people don't question it. Well, now you have the opportunity to come across all kinds of other alternatives. It's not just the church across the street anymore that's trying to, beckon you in. It's every church everywhere in the world has equal access, or at least you have equal access to its information or their information.
Yeah, I wish I was, one of these teenagers today who's got all of these opportunities, because I look back, I was tremendously curious about Buddhism. Right after I left Christianity and I was exploring other religions, Buddhism always had a certain appeal to me, just on the few things that I knew about it. Like the Four Noble Truths, I think, was the extent of what I knew about Buddhism, and it appealed to me. I was like, I want to learn more about this. But there was no Buddhist temple nearby that I could go visit. There was nothing. There was no group of people I could go and talk to. Maybe I could check a book out from the library, but is that really going to do me any good? Probably not. I could probably... No, but that would have required getting my lazy father to take me to the library, and that would have never happened. And they certainly weren't going to carry these books at my, high school's library.
Right.
So the opportunities were very limited. The internet did exist then, but we didn't have it. Not everyone did have the internet back then. I wish I could have explored that with the tools of today, where they're like, oh, I'm curious. This is what I think, just enter whatever you happen to believe into a search engine. It'll pop up. The top result is, maybe check out this religion. You believe that all living beings suffer, and this suffering causes unhappiness, and blah, 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 blah. Google that. Voila. Check out Buddhism.
Yeah, it's definitely a changed environment completely. I did have the internet in the 1990s when I was a teenager, and so
That's right. You were like one of the first, weren't you?
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but I mean, I was certainly I was online.
I don't mean like one of the first people. But okay, I don't know what I meant.
I was certainly online as early as probably 1994 or somewhere in that range.
Damn, that was early on.
We got cable modems in Sarasota County in 1996, if I recall correctly. We were the first, I think, test market for Comcast. Or one of the first test markets for Comcast. So I've been on broadband for a very, very long time.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I grew up as a...
I was using dial-up as late as like 2008, I think.
Man, that's brutal. Wow.
Mississippi, man. It's back there.
So I grew up as a Presbyterian Christian, and I can't tell you what the difference between a Presbyterian Christian and any other Christian was.
If it helps, I couldn't either for the most part. I know that Baptists and Methodists, that they disagree about baptism.
Yeah, I know the Baptists get the full dunking in the pool. And the only reason I know that is because there was a Baptist church near my neighborhood, and my neighborhood's association or whatever had their meetings at the church, and I was bewildered at how big their bathtub was. Like it was a human-sized, like tall level bathtub that you could completely submerge somebody in. It's like, wow, that's pretty wild. So anyway, that's how I grew up, but I did discover on the internet, I think the organization was called American Atheists, the American Atheists. And they had a website way back in the 1990s and the mid-90s. And so that's how I learned a lot about all of the contradictions in the Bible. I certainly hadn't read the whole thing or anything like that. But they're very informative information that absolutely helped me. I mean, I was already on the path of questioning things, but getting those questions answered was something you couldn't do in church, right? Like that was the problem. They didn't have the answers to the questions that I had, but the internet did. Of course, I ended up becoming a pantheist probably a decade after that. So I was like an atheist for probably about 10 years before I finally sort of rediscovered God. But if you want to share your thoughts here on the rise of Satanism, the number is 603-283-6160. The Reverend Diarmid McCullough, the emeritus professor of the history of the church at the University of Oxford, said, "I'd say all these are symptoms of people who've been disappointed by other religions or who may only know them superficially and who are looking for a system of belief to make their own, since our society encourages individual consumer choice and research," he said. Contrary to the stereotypes...
It's interesting. Who is this? He was an professor at where now?
Professor of the history of the church.
I wonder if he knows that he basically just quoted one of the openings of one of the chapters of the Satanic Bible.
I bet he does not
Which is effectively that every religion that's ever existed, every god that humans have ever worshipped, was just invented by human beings.
Sure.
So make up your own god and worship that.
Contrary to the stereotypes, only a fringe minority of Satanists actually worship the devil. Instead, the religion's fascination with Satan is more metaphorical, identifying with the figure of the rebel as epitomized in the protagonist of John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost. Satanists generally do not believe in a higher power and instead revolve around a religion of the self, believing that it's up to individuals to define their own moral code and to develop themselves as their own godheads.
Which is all really good. It's all really good, and I really, really like it. And I can see how the Church of Satan became what it became. Because it got wrapped up in the...
You mean corrupted?
Yes. It got wrapped up in the democratic ideology that by becoming part of this other thing, this great country, this America, we can be better, we can...
This other thing that's greater than us but is totally not God.
Yes. That's effectively what they did. And it's sad because, as this guy pointed out in this article, Satanism is adversarial. It is about rebellion against the king, the arbitrary authority of a god or king or ruler. Because look at the Bible from any rational perspective, and Yahweh is a brutal tyrant. He commands, he says, do this, and if you don't, I'm going to punish you. Well, that's exactly
I need sacrifice.
Yeah, that's all governments say is do this or we'll punish you. And if you ask them, well, why? Those will be because we said so.
Right, and the government wants you to sacrifice your value to them all the time.
Yep. And Lucifer came along, or Satan, and said, no, we're...
The light bringer.
Right, we're going to rebel against this. We're going to think for ourselves. We're going to challenge authority, question authority, and we're going to demand authority hold itself accountable. And of course, authority figures, they don't like that at all. So like Zeus did to Prometheus, or Yahweh did to Lucifer, or governments do to rebellious people all the time, off with his head.
Yeah. However, this does not preclude Satanists from having fun getting together and doing rituals in the forest, unquote, by candlelight, encircled and enrobed. Chaplain Leopold, this is the guy from...
There's a lot of fun to be had in satanic rituals, man.
This is the guy from the Global Order of Satan UK. Chaplain Leopold said that ritual is used as a form of community bonding and meditation to give people the time to develop, quote, your own personal vision of yourself as Satan. You wouldn't recognize a Satanist most of the time if you passed them on the street, he said, but then we like to have the ritual space, which is when we don the robes and light the candles and hail Satan and everything else that we wish to do. He said further, because we embrace that aspect, it's almost like a form of mindfulness, a form of self-actualization. And while religions think they're casting magic spells when they perform their rituals, whereas we just believe that we're all coming together and affirming our bonds as humans. He said, you should never feel like it's a chore going to a satanic ritual. It should be like, oh, God, it's Sunday. Or he's saying, rather, it shouldn't be like, oh, God, it's Sunday. We have to go to church. It should be something you want to engage in, that you're enjoying and benefiting from. And that should be true of anything that you do.
I was going to say, many Christians enjoy going to church. Not all of them dread it.
But if you don't, you're going to the wrong place.
Yeah.
Right? There's more coming up here. The number 603-283-6160, and there's a variety of Christian, options out there. Some of them are less stuffy than others, right? So there's more coming up, though. You can share your thoughts and bring up whatever's on your mind here. We got ChatGPT and more on religion on the way.
Does this ever happen to you? Moments after you're introduced to someone, you forget his or her name. It's a common faux pas you'll want to avoid, especially if you're a job seeker. And even if you're not, here's a tip. As you are being introduced, and while you're still shaking hands, smiling, and making eye contact, say the person's name aloud. Not only does that make a deposit in your memory bank, it acknowledges the other person. And that is more than a nuance, as is maintaining eye contact. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. Cutting through the clutter rather than blending into the blah, blah, blah will help you connect better no matter what the conversation. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Classified documents have been found at the home of former US Vice President Mike Pence. It comes after sensitive documents were also found at the residencies of President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. US correspondent William Denslow reports.
The former Vice President's lawyer Greg Jacobs says a small number of classified documents were inadvertently boxed and transported to Mike Pence's personal residence at the end of the Trump presidency. His legal team says they were discovered last week, and Pence says he was unaware these documents existed and understands the importance of protecting sensitive information. President Joe Biden is also facing scrutiny for his handling of such materials after classified documents were found at his residences or former offices on 4 occasions. Around 300 documents, some marked as top secret, were also found last year at Donald Trump's primary residence at Mar-a-Lago. The Department of Justice has appointed special counsels to investigate the current and former president.
There is still no commitment from the United Nations Security Council members to send a multinational security force to Haiti. Gang-related violence has intensified there, leaving several police officers dead and blocking aid from entering the country. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
It's a critical time for Haiti, says its representative to the United Nations. Antonio Rodriguez says the gang violence is out of control, with police officers being killed almost daily. He is continuing the call to the UN to deploy a multinational force to assist with the security situation there. But there's no concrete commitments from member states. The UK says it's open to further discussions, while Japan says it will continue to support the Haitian Police Department. Meanwhile, the UN reports that murders are up by 1/3 since last year, and close to 5 million people are facing acute hunger across the country.
And nominations for the Oscars have been released, with several blockbusters in with a chance of winning Best Picture. Our US correspondent Sally Patterson has more details.
The countdown has begun to one of Hollywood's most glamorous events. 8 films received 5 or more Oscar nominations. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once led the way with 11. It's a record-setting year for performers of Asian descent, but advocacy group Women in Film condemned the Oscars for its lack of female nominees in the Best Director category. The group accused Academy voters of not valuing women's voices. The Academy has not responded to the criticism. The Oscars will be broadcast on March the 12th, hosted by Jimmy Kimmel. Last year drew 16.6 million viewers, its second lowest figures on record.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
Yep, it is Free Talk Live. The phones are open. You can join the show here. I want to say thank you to our Free Talk Live supporters like Shooty, who is a member of our AMPS program. You can join Shooty. Shooty is silver level, which means that he is doing $5 a month. That's all we ask over at amps.freetalklive.com. AMP stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. It is a way for you to get behind what we do here if you like us talking about the ideas of freedom and liberty and peace on a regular basis here on Free Talk Live. Then you can join the AMPS program. And it will help us, hopefully, stay mostly advertiser-free. Like I said before, if we never have another live sponsor again, I'd be totally fine with that. Obviously, on a radio show, we still have to have commercial breaks just because we would never get on any commercial radio stations if we didn't. So those will stay.
Well, I would assume if that was the case, then they would just like do a hard cut when we were talking, like in the middle of a conversation.
But that sounds terrible. Why would you want to do that? I wouldn't want to.
Yeah, someone on LRN used to do that, didn't they? They would just like talk right through. They would just ignore it, and then it would come back.
I really hated that too when that happened. That doesn't happen anymore, thank goodness. But that's because we got rid of all the other live shows on LRN. But anyway, we're continuing here, and we really appreciate your direct support. That makes this possible, but we could use some more of it because, like, technically we don't technically have the bills paid here from direct support. So if we want to continue with no advertisers, like I said, I'd be totally fine with it. So please help us out like Shooty did over at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. We've been talking about religion here, specifically the satanic religions, which, as they point out here in the story at the Telegram, and as I'm sure Aria, you as a high priestess in the Reformed Satanic Church would also agree with, the Satanists of today, they're not actually worshiping Satan per se. They don't believe in a devil or a guy with a what is the trident or whatever Satan has. All of that stuff, all the imagery from Christianity. They reject this sort of supernatural aspect or whatever of Satanism, and they embrace the individuality aspect, as you were saying, the rebellion aspect, or at least supposedly, as you've criticized the Satanic Church, the original Satanic Church. They said one thing, and then they did another thing, which was to say, support supposedly individuality, support rebellion, but then actually go and support the government and support the state, which is, of course, the antithesis of rebellion. It is the suppression of rebellion and the suppression of individuality. And so those are some of the things that led you to found the Reformed Satanic Church, I presume?
Yes, exactly those.
Yeah. So, not all satanic churches are created the same in the same way that not all Christian churches are identical. So, do your own research when it comes to this particular topic. Now, the Satanic Church we were introduced to tonight that, they don't get into the specifics of its tenets or whatever, is this new one to us, which was the Global Order of Satan UK. We should see if we can pull up their website at some point just to see, like at a glance, see if you can figure out like how they differ.
That's a good point.
If they differ from the Church of Satan. But meanwhile, here there's a few more thoughts from the Telegraph story about the Satanists. Their numbers are increasing in the UK. They've gone up 100, I believe it was like 140 or 170%, quite a bit in the last decade. From a couple thousand to about 5,000 individuals in the UK. And they're pointing out here that, when you go to a church, it should be a fun thing. And I think that's true whether we're talking about Satanism or we're talking about Christianity or something else. It shouldn't be a chore. It should be something that you enjoy. And that's just generally, I think a life truth is like if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Why wouldn't God want you to have a good time in whatever form of worship that you're doing? Despite
a lot of these religions seem to be about not having a good time, like
that's true.
Sacrificing a good time in this way, being miserable in return for some sort of better life in the next.
Well, I mean, that may be their teachings or whatever, and we can criticize that, but I was just like meaning the actual form of worship, right? So like even though Christians have that belief that you're talking about there, some of them are a little more fun with their worship, right? So like you go to a black church, they're singing, they got tambourines, they're dancing, they definitely seem to be having more fun than some stodgy old white church where they're singing from a hymnal and everyone's standing still and looking straight forward. Like there's a significant difference in the energy of that room.
Yeah, but I don't know that I disagree that the Southern Baptists who are just standing there, or sitting and singing along in the hymnal are having less fun.
Okay, I don't know either. I'll tell you, it wasn't fun for me as a kid growing up a Presbyterian.
But I think they probably just experience it differently.
Maybe.
In the same way that I would have fun watching a football game with friends hanging out drinking or whatever. It wouldn't be my choice of what to do, but I would still have fun. But I wouldn't be jumping up and down, screaming and shouting when my team scored a goal.
Right.
As a friend might.
Because you're not a true believer.
Right.
A little bit more here, though. Chaplain Leopold said that because of the stigma associated with Satanism, many people may not feel comfortable to declare themselves as affiliated with the religion. So,
I know that feeling all too well.
So yeah, he may be what he's suggesting here is that maybe the numbers are higher than what the official government numbers are suggesting. Malcolm Jerry, who's the co-founder of the Satanic Temple based in Salem, Massachusetts, suggested that the ONS figures, which is that's their census over there in the UK, were a drastic underestimate. He said his organization, which was founded in 2012, has 21,996 members registered from the UK. So remember, they only found like 5,000 in the national census.
Okay.
So he's saying he knows of at least 4 times that many just for his satanic church, which wouldn't count the other satanic churches that are represented there.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and he says they have around 1 million followers worldwide.
Oh, okay, yeah, those are your Facebook likes don't count, dude.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Is he counting followers here, or is like Facebook likes, or is he actually saying they have members? Because he used the term members.
When he says 1 million followers worldwide, I don't think there's any way he means any sort of like membership database or
paying
anything
dues
like that.
or something like that.
It's gotta just be. I mean, I don't think the Libertarian Party, the National Libertarian Party of the U.S. has 1 million people.
No, hell no. I don't think they even have 1 million followers. I don't know. I think it was like 700,000 or something the last time I looked.
Yeah, so to think that this one satanic organization in the United Kingdom has it, I mean, Satanism would be a much bigger deal if it had that level of popularity and notoriety.
Yeah, now you made me curious. I'm going to have to pull up the Satanic Temple.
While you're doing that, I did happen to pull up 140,000
followers on Twitter.
Okay.
So
well,
something.
Not awful.
You were going to say?
Yeah, I did happen to pull up their teachings. They don't.
This is the Global Order of Satan?
Yes.
Okay. In the UK.
They are very similar to the Satanic Temple's teachings. The Satanic Temple had 7. The Global Order of Satan has 6, which I find curious. I want to know what they omitted, what they removed from the tenets of Satanism as defined by the Satanic Temple, but
I want to get through them, but let me just get the rest of the, we're at the last paragraph here, so I'm going to just wrap this one out here. So the co-founder of the Satanic Temple claims over 1 million followers worldwide. He said, the demographics of the Satanic Temple membership are fairly broad, but certainly younger people tend to be more engaged in activism, so they are more visible. I think our rise in popularity is founded on having a set of principles and values that resonates with many people and our rejection of hypocrisy and corruption.
I like it.
So there you go. All right. So now with that, you have
So
these
what are
6
those principles?
Indeed. So I don't have those here for the Satanic Temple, but you have them for
I have
the Global
both the
Order.
Satanic Temple and the Global Order pulled up. I only pulled up the Satanic Temple because I want to compare them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to have to do that after the break because it's too much information to process while also talking.
Yeah, that's fine.
So the Global Order of Satan has 6 fundamental pillars of what they believe. 1, self-fulfillment and personal understanding allow us to support ourselves and therefore others. So personal understanding and self-fulfillment, these are important things. Understandable.
Yep. Oh, you got to be able to support yourself before you can support someone else.
Number 2 is respect the inviolable body, autonomous will, and sovereign right of every individual to guide their own life and being, remembering that enjoyment of these rights is predicated on respect for the same in others.
Yes, this is a pretty big one here. Respect of the inviolable body. Inviolable meaning that thou shalt not violate someone else's body.
Yes. And that's almost identical to the wording of the Satanic Temple, which is one's body is inviolable, subject to one's will alone.
Okay.
I like the Satanic Temple's better because it's shorter. And I guess the point across.
Shorter is usually better if you can make the same point. That much is absolutely true.
However, they do rightly point out that remembering that enjoyment of these rights, autonomy and inviolable body, requires you to respect those same rights in others.
Okay, I like that. Do they hold to it? That's the question, because the Church of Satan has fallen from their principles. This one's a relatively new church as of 2012, so they haven't been around for that long, just barely a decade at this point. So are they still sticking with it, or are they not so much? And if you are involved with the Satanic Temple and you want to call in here and share your thoughts on what's the reality on the ground of what are the members, what are the, I don't know if you call them ministers or preachers or whatever, what's the term now? Priestesses? Priests and priestesses?
It probably varies from one group to the next on what they prefer to be called.
Yeah, are these people actually respecting, not violating the individuality and the bodies of others, or are they advocating for the state?
Well, I would suggest the Satanic Temple, so far, in my experience with them, is holding true to its stated beliefs.
Okay. I mean, so
no
far,
one's perfect.
The only thing I ever hear about them is that they challenge the state on inclusivity, which seems totally legit.
Yeah.
To me.
They do that, and they also argue for abortion rights and pro-choice things and pro-acceptance and tolerance. So, in my experience, they do that. They do uphold their beliefs, but maybe I'm wrong. Number 3, science, evidence, reason, and critical thinking should guide our beliefs about our universe. Truly critical thinking can only be, if they meant true critical thinking can only be achieved by challenging your own preconceptions and opinions, providing a more balanced outlook to help us make better informed decisions.
Another good one, however, it makes me wonder, what were they saying during COVID, right? So they're talking about challenging your own opinions and challenging, standard beliefs or whatever.
That sounds like a really good litmus test. Let's find out what the global order of Satan was saying about masks and vaccines during COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Number 4, act with empathy, compassion, and wisdom towards yourself and others. Hard to argue with anything
I like
there.
That one.
Number 5, justice.
That's a pretty universal one, too.
It is.
Right? From pretty much any religion out there, you're going to hear something like that.
Number 5 is also very similar to one of the fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple. Justice always takes precedence over law, institutions, and religious texts, as long as the pursuit of it does not countermand these pillars. And I don't like that at all. Yeah. What they're
Seems
trying to say...
contradictory.
Yes. What they're trying to say is, let me find it, the struggle for justice. Where is it?
Are you looking for the Satanic Temple one?
Yeah, and I had it pulled up in front of me, but...
I haven't been able to find them yet on their website, otherwise I would have had
Every
them.
tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word, which is basically the same thing. The law doesn't matter. Justice is what matters.
Okay.
And too many people get caught in this mindset of, oh, well, the law says this, and therefore that's what justice is. Satanism exists to point out that no, just because the law says doesn't mean it's just.
Indeed, there's plenty of examples of that in Christianity, right? Where God said A, B, and C, and it's like, well, that ain't right.
And the global order of Satan seems to be setting themselves up here to say is a do as we say, not as we do kind of thing, as long as the pursuit of it does not countermand the pillars, the great pillars of the
law,
of the glorious global order of Satan.
Oh, I thought they were talking about the pillars of the law. Read the whole thing
Well,
again?
these are the 6 pillars. Justice always takes
pillars,
precedence over laws, institutions, and religious texts, as long as the pursuit of justice does not countermand the pillars.
Okay. Well,
So
I see what they're saying. Like if it countermands being empathetic or whatever the previous one said, then you wouldn't want to do that.
I don't know if I want to establish any. I think it's unwise to establish a sort of hard rule like that, where you must never act without empathy, because maybe there's a scenario in which it's better to not act with compassion. Like,
perhaps
impossible though it is, right? We can all imagine a scenario where if you murdered an infant, the world would be a better place. But if you acted with empathy, you would not murder that infant, right?
Are we talking about baby Hitler right now?
Absolutely. Right? And it's a silly argument, but it goes to show that none of these hard and fast rules are always going to hold up in every single scenario. So
that tends to be true about rules.
Yeah, so just don't make the rule. Just say justice takes precedence over laws, institutions, and religious texts. Leave it at that.
Okay.
Number 6, all people make mistakes. Allow them to correct those mistakes as we seek acceptance in others over our own.
Agreed.
And I like that one. I think that's also one of the Satanic Temple tenets as well.
That's practicing forgiveness.
Yeah,
right?
no
That's
one's
what
perfect.
they're talking about.
And I think people are fallible, is what the Satanic Temple says. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused.
Wait, that one was Satanic Temple?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
The Satanic Temple is very, when you listen to what the essence of what they're saying is, it's very libertarian in its message. Justice, compassion, empathy, freedom. The freedom of others must be respected, including the freedom to offend. That's the Satanic Temple. And it's like,
I gotta like that.
One's body is inviolable.
Have you ever considered going down to Salem?
I've been to Salem.
And visiting their home office?
No.
I'm talking about Salem, Massachusetts?
Yeah, I've been to Salem, Massachusetts.
But you didn't go. You didn't stop by the Satanic Temple home offices while you were there.
I was there I was giving a friend a ride there. He was buying a car, and he just needed a ride there and back. So I didn't hang around.
Darn it!
Yeah,
that could have been fun.
But I living as close to Salem, Massachusetts. I know I'm a horrible Satanist for not having done it already.
You got to make a pilgrimage.
I know,
right?
I know, man.
Let's go to the phones here. We got Joe in Maryland. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Joe.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey,
Ian? How you
you're on
doing,
the air. What's on your mind?
Okay, let's talk about. You guys were wondering who Jesus Christ is. Going to the council in IC in 325, and I was raised Catholic, so this is what they said. They said he is both man and God is three beings in one God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Okay, so you're saying the answer to the question is Jesus is both God and the Son of God?
He's both man and God.
He's not God.
And he's also the Son of God. He was,
Sorry, your cell phone's kind of a little janky here. Can you repeat that one more time? You're saying he isn't God, or he is God?
Okay, he's both man and God.
He's man and God. So
God.
Is he the Son of God?
Exactly. Yes, and he is also the Son of God.
Okay, so the answer,
and God.
You're saying the answer is both. He is both God and the Son of God.
Yes.
Okay.
How does that work, man?
It makes the most sense to me.
How does that work?
Okay.
I can't be my own parent.
If you're God, you can.
God is three beings in one God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Well, that's the part that doesn't make any sense to me.
You don't see any issue there with saying that God is three beings who are one being, who are three beings who are one being.
That's the part that makes absolutely no sense. I mean, why wouldn't God be all the beings?
But God, well, he is.
Okay.
God is three beings in one spirit.
Well, that's not the same thing. I said all
Yes,
of
it
the
is.
beings. All of the beings.
He's all the beings incorporated.
Okay, so
none of them are God, but by their powers combined, they are God.
Would you say that you're a pantheist?
No, I believe in God, Yahweh, God of the Bible.
Okay.
Okay, well, I just want to clarify what you're saying then. So you're saying that your God is a Christian God?
He's Catholic, Christian, but really, see, here's what happened. The Christians spun off from Catholicism, so they don't worship everything that the Catholics do.
Okay.
So they probably won't be saved.
That's one of the things that amazes me about Christianity. If you look at just one denomination of Christianity and one denomination of Islam, then every single soul on this planet, every single person alive is believed to be destined to eternal torture by someone else on this planet. And that's what
it's horrifying.
No, that's not. And you say that. I mean, you say exactly like that's not a horrifying thing, dude. That's absolutely grotesque. That is Christianity and Islam. That's Yahweh's great gift to the world. Everyone believes everyone else is doomed to eternal torture, and they're okay with it.
How can you, Joe? I got to say, I'm really confused by what you're saying here because it sounded to me like you said a moment ago. It sounded like you said God is all of things and all religions, but then you just said that you think that only one particular belief system will be saved? Did I misunderstand you?
Exactly. That's what I said, because they don't keep the same law and they don't keep the same canon.
Huh?
Okay, but is their God the same God that you worship?
Yeah. God, well, it all depends. Some people think...
what does God say?
Allah's different. Oh, God says he's ultimate.
Okay, but is only one group... what does Joe believe? Do you believe that only
Catholic.
one group of people
Catholic.
is going to be saved?
Who am I to believe that? I'm Catholic. I believe what I was taught, and I don't know. I'm just...
What do you believe, man?
Well, wait. What do Catholics believe? Do Catholics believe that only Catholics will be saved, or do they believe something else?
Well,
Sorry, you broke up. One more time?
if you were raised correctly, yes.
Yes,
Because
Catholics believe
yes,
that only
because you
Catholics will be saved?
Right, because you keep the Lord's canon, you keep the Lord's law.
So just to clarify, do you believe that as a Catholic?
Well, I'm nobody.
It's okay to believe that, man. Just yes or no.
You're nobody.
Let me say, I'm nobody, and not rich, but I'm nobody when it comes to telling you what to do or say.
I'm not asking you to tell me what to do or say. I'm asking what you believe.
I believe I have a better path to heaven by being Catholic and believing in Catholic canon and Catholic doctrine.
What will happen to the people who do not believe in Catholicism?
I'm not God, so
Okay. It's fair enough to say you don't know, right? That's a fair answer
know,
to say you don't know. Okay, fair enough.
But whatever it is, it's not. It's the opposite of being saved. It's what the Catholics are the ones being saved from ? Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
But we don't know what this ? is that Yahweh intends to do to all of the people who aren't Catholics.
Exactly.
But it's probably a bad thing, right?
It's what you believe. I'm not telling you to believe the way I believe. And
well, thank you, because it would have worked anyway if you'd done that.
Right. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm just saying that's my belief.
All right. Yeah, fair enough. And you are entitled to it, sir. And thank you for the call. I appreciate you explaining it to answer those. They're tough questions, so thank you.
I was just curious. Thank you.
Let's go to Chuck. He's in Washington. Chuck, you're on Free Talk Live with Ian and Aria.
Wow. I just wanted to say, I don't mean to attack any of the callers or anything like that, but how do I... It sounds like he's got a better fire insurance plan, and how do I take advantage of that?
You talking about our last caller?
Yeah.
That's got to be some sort of joke that I don't get.
It's some kind of joke.
Well, a fire insurance plan is referencing to the belief system that some of the Christians have when they say that when you challenge them and say, well, how can you believe in this? And then they say, well, it's better to go to hell than heaven. So ultimately, at the end of their life, it's an insurance system.
Oh, isn't that Pascal's wager?
They just believe hard enough. I don't know. But if you just believe hard enough, then you'll get there. You know what I mean? And if you just believe my way, which is the right way, you'll get there with me.
Yeah, see, I don't agree at all. And this is sort of my issue. I tend to think, look, I'm not a violent and petty God in the way that Yahweh is defined or described, but I'm not a God at all. And I tend to think if I was, and I had someone here who was worshiping someone else, let's say there was Ian and I, we both rule universes. My people are worshiping Ian, and some of my people are worshiping no one. They're just saying, we don't know what to believe, so we're not believing anything. It seems to me like the ones who don't believe anything are preferred over the ones who are actively worshiping a different God. So it seems to me like the consequences of picking the wrong God are higher and worse than the consequences of picking no God at all.
Isn't it kind of magic, though, do you think? I mean, it kind of gets into the whole notion of magic and that sort of thing.
Well, it's only magic as in like these religious beliefs have cast a spell over individuals.
Well, yes, they do. I mean, let's talk about that, because there was a guy, I can't remember this guy's name. He's a genius. He gets interviewed on Joe Rogan quite regularly, and he talks about mushrooms and everything like that. But he talks about, let's talk about in the Catholic belief, the whole...
Hold that thought, Chuck. I want to make sure you have a chance to express it here fully. The mushroom guy. I think I know who he's talking about.
I do not.
But I don't know his name. He's like probably the most preeminent mycologist out there right now. Stamets? Paul Stamets? I think that might be his name. There's more coming up here. Hour number 3 is on the way. You can share your thoughts on religion or whatever's on your mind here on Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live.
So we had a guy call in on Saturday, and he was really kind of befuddled as to why anyone would alter their consciousness at all. Like, he had done a little bit of drinking when he was younger, but he's an older guy, and he just really couldn't get it. And I imagine it's really kind of difficult for somebody who doesn't get it. It's really easy to look down your nose at that point. I imagine it's really difficult for people like that to understand, but the fact is that if you're not altering your consciousness as a being on this planet, you're probably in the minority.
Or at some point in your life. Because some people, they kind of get out of it when they get older for whatever reason. They just get tired of it, or they've had enough of that experience.
By definition, caffeine is a drug.
Sure it is.
Absolutely. It's a consciousness altering drug to some
Wait
extent.
until you give me a can of Diet Coke. I will flip out right here.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Classified documents have been found at the home of former US Vice President Mike Pence. It comes after sensitive documents were also found at the residencies of President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. US correspondent William Denslow reports.
The former Vice President's lawyer Greg Jacobs says a small number of classified documents were inadvertently boxed and transported to Mike Pence's personal residence at the end of the Trump presidency. His legal team says they were discovered last week, and Pence says he was unaware these documents existed and understands the importance of protecting sensitive information. President Joe Biden is also facing scrutiny for his handling of such materials after classified documents were found at his residences or former offices on 4 occasions. Around 300 documents, some marked as top secret, were also found last year at Donald Trump's primary residence at Mar-a-Lago. The Department of Justice has appointed special counsels to investigate the current and former president.
There is still no commitment from the United Nations Security Council members to send a multinational security force to Haiti. Gang-related violence has intensified there, leaving several police officers dead and blocking aid from entering the country. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
It's a critical time for Haiti, says its representative to the United Nations. Antonio Rodriguez says the gang violence is out of control, with police officers being killed almost daily. He is continuing the call to the UN to deploy a multinational force to assist with the security situation there. But there's no concrete commitments from member states. The UK says it's open to further discussions, while Japan says it will continue to support the Haitian Police Department. Meanwhile, the UN reports that murders are up by 1/3 since last year, and close to 5 million people are facing acute hunger across the country.
And nominations for the Oscars have been released, with several blockbusters in with a chance of winning Best Picture. Our US correspondent Sally Patterson has more details.
The countdown has begun to one of Hollywood's most glamorous events. 8 films received 5 or more Oscar nominations. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once led the way with 11. It's a record-setting year for performers of Asian descent, but advocacy group Women in Film condemned the Oscars for its lack of female nominees in the Best Director category. The group accused Academy voters of not valuing women's voices. The Academy has not responded to the criticism. The Oscars will be broadcast on March the 12th, hosted by Jimmy Kimmel. Last year drew 16.6 million viewers, its second lowest figures on record.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more depth at the news that India may have overtaken China to become the world's most populous nation. As we reported last week, the World Population Review says India, with 1.42 billion people, is now home to 5 million more than China. That's partly due to a decline in China's population of 850,000 last year, the first time that's happened since the 1960s.
The idea that India can claim the largest country in the world is important for their own self-image.
Dr. Adnan Nasimullah directs the India Institute at King's College London and says the news does not necessarily support Indian government hopes that the country's economy will soon outpace China's.
China's economy in per capita terms is about 6 times the size of India's. They've had very different histories of industrialization and sort of centralization. India is going to grow and eventually will become one of the world's largest economies, but it's still a very poor country. Most of the Indian economy is still sort of relatively within relatively low productivity activities. China is effectively an almost completely industrialized country.
But the Confederation of Indian Industry forecasts that India can grow to a $40 trillion economy by the year 2047 if it uses its young workforce effectively. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our main news again. Classified documents have been found at the home of former US Vice President Mike Pence. There's still no commitment from the United Nations Security Council to send a multinational security force to Haiti. Gang-related violence has intensified there. And nominations for the Oscars have been released, with several blockbusters in with a chance of winning Best Picture. And that's the latest feature story news. Kate Fisher reporting.
Studies show that more and more teenagers are leaving Facebook, but where are they going instead? Apparently to the hottest new social media site in years, the comments section of this YouTube video of a deer running in slow motion. Already, its comments section is seeing over 30 million active users. Facebook isn't giving up so easily, incorporating images and videos of deer, elk, reindeer, and even moose into their layout. But teens say that misses the point entirely. In fact, the site's one unwritten rule: don't post anything about the video itself. Teens say that's not cool. But with more and more people swapping over to the comments section of the slow motion deer video by the day, some trend watchers warn it may begin going the way of Facebook.
I was obsessed with it for a while, but now it's just boring. I'm probably going to switch over to Happy Fast Kitchen.
While we don't know for sure, we believe Happy Fast Kitchen might refer to the Yelp page for a Chinese food restaurant in Cleveland, the new social media site where musician Skrillex recently dropped his latest album.
This is the Onion News Network.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live. It is Free Talk Live. Phones are open. You can join the show. And we're kicking off the third hour here with you tonight. It's Ian
and Arya
talking about the shifting religious beliefs out there amongst the people in, at least in the Western world. We focused a little bit on the UK numbers, which are probably similar to the US, where Christianity, the number of that is going down. The percentage of population that follows Christianity going down. The number of non-religious people on the rise, the number of Satanists on the rise. Actually, the number of a lot of things are on the rise. Buddhists, Islam, and a few others. Numbers are up. Not much, not significantly or anything like that.
But they are up.
Christianity is way down. And so that's what we've been focusing on here tonight, especially on the Satanic Temple and the Global Order of Satan, which we were just reading the pillars, the 6 pillars, I believe it was.
I think that was what they said, yeah.
And we were going through some of that. There were some questions that we had. Arya, you were raised Christian. I was as well, both in the South, but you were in the real South. You were in Mississippi. I was just on the west coast of Florida.
And,
anyway.
I had a lot of these questions answered by Christians throughout most of my life, but some of these things, and look, I know when I ask a Christian out there to explain the Trinity, I know it's a trick question.
You're not going to get a good answer.
Well, I know I'm not going to get a good answer, and I know it's only something I wouldn't ask them if I thought they could actually give me a good answer. The problem with the Trinity is that it's complete nonsense. It makes absolutely no sense, and they have to write thousands upon thousands of words, redefining this word to mean that word, and we meant son, but we don't really mean son. What we really meant by son is parent, or whatever it is. They jump through all of these mental gymnastics.
We had this one guy call in who seemed, quite intelligent, but he could not make heads nor tails. I couldn't understand what he was saying when we asked him that question.
The Holy Trinity, like many aspects of Christianity, it just exists in this sphere of things that we refuse to think about.
We say so, and that's all you need to know.
And that Christians are big. That's one of their favorite things. And the Holy Trinity more than anything else in Christianity is that. Yes, Jesus is God's son. Yes, Jesus is God. Yes, that means he's his own son. Don't think about it. Just go with it.
And there's this whole Holy Ghost thing as well, which is a thing.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. So let's go back to Chuck. He's on the line in Washington State. Chuck, you're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead.
You are the Holy Ghost. You talking about it right now, right? That's part of the magic I was talking about the last hour. The magic within this whole idea of Christianity, contemporary Christianity, and I wasn't talking about Paul Stamets, by the way. I was talking about Duncan Trussell.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with him.
Well, he goes on Coast to Coast every once in a while. He's, but anyway, kind of a philosophical kind of guy.
Okay.
He made a point on Joe Rogan's show there that when he's talking to Christians about their belief system, and if you really think about it, it sounds like magic. It sounds like a bunch of magic that's quite frankly, voodoo grabs from to make their belief system work.
I don't know what you mean.
Well, okay, you don't know what I mean?
No, can you explain what about Christianity suggests magic to you?
Okay, yeah, Jesus Christ turning water into wine, for example.
Okay, yeah, magic.
Okay, that's
a good
magic,
example,
right?
Yeah, that's absolutely.
What about the whole notion of a virgin having a child?
Well, that's absolute nonsense. That's not even magic at that point. But yeah, I mean,
well, you're discussing supernatural occasions in the Bible, sure.
Right, but when you go and point that out to these Christians that are locked into their belief system and unwilling to go and take a look at other things and take a look at themselves as far as what they believe, no, you can't. No, that's not magic. That's Jesus. That's God. That's Jesus and God. That's the Holy Trinity. But that's not magic. But I mean, if you were talking,
yeah, I get it. I mean, realistically, a prayer is nothing but an attempt to cast a spell, right? So I mean, I get it. It's just a different way of saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, you know darn well when you cast your spell, you're going to get hypnotized with your eyes. A heart of stone can turn to clay. I mean, come on now.
Chuck, thanks for the call tonight. I do appreciate hearing from you. Let's continue here with Wendy. She's also in Washington State. Go ahead, Wendy.
Hi, I just wanted to bring up the Trinity.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, okay.
Kind of in and out, yeah. And I never could commit to it. I mean, I'm 64. My mother was in it when I was 3.5.
Wow.
Is when she came into it. But
when did they ask you to, before we get to the Trinity thing, I mean, Jehovah's Witness is kind of an interesting religion. When they ask you to commit to it, what does that mean as a teenager or a young person?
Baptized, but they didn't ask me.
It means what? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So they getting baptized.
Okay, gotcha. And is that a choice that you have to make in that church? So, like, for instance,
no, you don't.
Right, because when I was in the Presbyterian church, I had no choice over that. It was just something my parents had done to me.
No, they want you to wait till you're older and have more knowledge.
Well, that's at least commendable.
Okay, well, so wait, you're saying it isn't?
So what I wanted to say, though, I believe the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit. I believe they're separate, but they both have the Holy Spirit. And, nobody's perfect on this earth. Let's face it. And, I believe that God did send his son down here to die as a human.
All right, let's slow it down here, Wendy. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. You said you believe the Holy Spirit, the Trinity or whatever, the Holy Spirit, God, and Jesus are all separate?
Oh, absolutely. And I believe the Holy Spirit is what they both have.
Okay, wait. So that means the Holy Spirit is not separate, but Jesus and God are separate?
They are separate, but the Holy Spirit is what they both have.
What does that mean, they both have it? What does it mean to have the Holy Spirit?
Well, whatever their knowledge is, to me, would be the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
You know,
So is that different from the standard Christian belief? Is that like your specific belief, Wendy?
There's many of them. But
so the Holy Spirit is knowledge?
Yeah, basically, I think.
Like the knowledge of God, like God-level knowledge?
Yes, but Christ was sent down here to die for our sins.
So just to clarify, you're saying like the Holy Spirit is sort of like the personal internet connection between Jesus and God. That's how they're connected, even though they're separate?
Yes.
Now, is that like a typical religious belief among Christians, or is that a unique belief unique to you, Wendy?
Some people believe that they're the same.
Say again?
Some people believe that and Christ are the same.
Okay, you're saying some Christians believe that?
Oh, yeah, the Trinity.
Okay, so you don't subscribe to the standard Christian belief, which you're saying is that they are all the same. Together, they're together, but they're kind of different, but they're all the same. Is that the standard Christian belief?
There is a Father and a Son, but they have the Holy Spirit.
That's what you believe.
Right.
Right. I'm asking you your understanding. Like, what do the Jehovah's Witnesses believe about this?
They believe something like that.
Something like that.
But, I've never, and it's so weird, my mother passed away a couple of years ago, and she has been a Jehovah's Witness since, like I said, I might have been 3.5.
Yeah.
And when she died, on her deathbed, she said, "Was I good enough?" And that my sister is gay, and that just made her sick. Are you good enough? I mean, she slept with one person all her life. My dad, who was
she asking you your opinion of whether she was good enough?
I think she was asking God.
Yeah. No, she was just saying, "Was I good enough?"
I see.
That's absolutely horrible. It's disgusting that religion can do that to a person on their deathbed. The only thing they're thinking about is whether or not they were freaking good enough.
Yeah. And it's like, don't you know you believe in Christ, that he didn't come down here for fun, if that's true.
The only real answer to that question is you're better than the people who made you ask whether or not you were good enough.
Exactly.
Wendy, thank you for the call tonight. I do appreciate hearing from you. The number is 603-283-6160. That's, I would say at this point, still not very clear what Christians believe. It sounds like Wendy is saying that Christians believe different things when it comes to this so-called Trinity.
I would suggest that most of them don't believe anything in regard to the Trinity.
You mean they're just regurgitating what they were told?
Yeah, I think Wendy is probably one of the few people who have actually given it any thought whatsoever, and that's why her answer was the most cogent of them.
That's a good point. Yeah, it was the most understandable.
Yeah, so
from what we've heard,
the Father and the Son are separate, and they both share this thing that binds them together.
Sort of the knowledge of God.
Right, but the Trinity, as I understand it, is this idea that they're all one and they're all different and they're all one and they're all different. And somehow there's no conflict there. And I don't think Christians believe anything about that. They just say it and then they wipe their minds of it so they don't have to think about it.
Well, and, having read the Quran, I understand that the key difference between Christianity and Islam is simply that the Islamic belief is that God is a monotheistic God, that there's just God.
Yeah.
That there's no Trinity or whatever, and that's where they really disagreed with the Christians. Otherwise, they're very, very similar in their belief systems. The Muslims believe the Bible. My understanding, that's the Quran came after the Bible. It's just they don't think that Jesus was the quote unquote Son of God, and they don't buy the whole Holy Spirit thing. So it's just like, to them, God is just God, and that at least on its face makes more sense.
Yeah, I like that a whole lot better.
And that's what they were trying to.
It always bothered me that Christians call themselves monotheistic, right? But they do.
Not true.
But they're demonstrably not. They're demonstrably polytheistic.
Yeah. Let's continue here. We have another caller. You are on the air. Caller, what is your name? You're on Free Talk Live.
My name is Andrew.
Andrew, go ahead. What's on your mind tonight?
So my understanding of the Trinity is that you have God the Creator, you have Jesus, which is God in the flesh, and then you have the Holy Spirit, which is God in the spirit. And the reason that Jesus was sent was to separate us from the old law, which was the Old Testament. And Jesus, the thing with Jesus was you didn't need the Ten Commandments anymore because you had the Holy Spirit to tell you what is right and wrong.
Right, but let's focus on the Trinity here, because what you said is curious. So Jesus is the physical manifestation of God, right?
Right.
And the Holy Spirit is the spiritual manifestation of God.
Right.
So what is the third one?
No, you have God the Creator.
The Creator. What is his what is he the manifestation of?
Spirit. That is the three.
Right. I think he would just say it's God.
So you got
a separate category.
So you got spirit, you got flesh, and you got question mark.
So you have the God that sits with the white beard in the clouds. You know that you can't see.
Okay, just to clarify, you don't believe this?
Well, I grew up in a Christian home, and that was my understanding of what the Trinity is that you have God in the flesh, and then you have God in the spirit. They all come from the same God.
See, but I need more elaboration on what this first one is. You got God the Creator. Of what? I mean, what is he? What is he made of? What gives him substance? The other one's flesh. The other one's spirit. What about this other?
Well, that's a silly question, Aria.
It's not a silly question at all. He's arguing that this thing exists.
I don't know if he's arguing
real.
That. I don't know if he's. I think he's just saying what people said to him.
I'm not arguing anything. I'm telling you what my understanding of the Trinity to be.
Do you believe in God the Creator?
I'm not arguing for or against anything.
Yeah.
You're asking a question, and I'm trying to answer the question.
Well, you haven't let me finish asking the question yet.
I think you're badgering him. I think he has answered the question.
Do you believe that this God the Creator exists?
Well, it has nothing to. I'm not on trial about my beliefs.
No, I'm just curious.
Question of what the Trinity is.
Right, and you answered it. Now she has a new
question. He's partially answered it. He has answered what two of those things are.
You can't answer what God is.
He refuses to answer what the third one is.
Well, hold on, Aria. Well, just one second, Andy. You can't answer in words very easily what God is.
Part of the whole Trinity concept is that all of these things are one and they're all separate. So he's pointed out how two of them are separate and what gives them their separate characteristics.
No,
but that's only like
if God creates everything. That is God. God is everything.
I tend to agree with that.
Understand. That is three. That's three things. You have God that is everything, and then you have God personified in the flesh.
But wouldn't that everything include the flesh?
Spirit.
He's saying that. He's saying
right. But so they're one and the same.
So my understanding, growing up as a Christian, was that was God's way of personifying himself on earth to experience what men experience on the earth.
I understand that.
Makes total sense. I would just say the only thing I would say is that wasn't just exclusive to Jesus, and I think there's actually a segment of the Bible, and I'm sorry I don't know what the passage was, but I could probably dig it up, where Jesus actually references the idea that everyone is connected to God. That God is essentially experiencing all of our experiences simultaneously. He's having whatever is having all of humans' experiences in any given moment. Having that, learning from it.
And supposedly that's why God sent you the Spirit, is so you didn't need man to tell you what the commandments were, because there's an Old Testament and a New Testament. And I think where a lot of Christians mess up is they don't separate themselves from the old law.
What's up with the? No, I mean, look, we are going to ask you a question about yourself here. It sounds like you were raised Christian. Are you still to this day?
Well, I don't go to church, if that's what you're asking.
All right, so you're more of an individual.
I'm a very spiritual person, but I try to look at how things actually apply to me in my life.
Yep. Okay.
And I don't just look at things like, oh, you just tell me A, B, and C, and I believe X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yeah, so I think that makes sense. I think a lot of people are like you these days.
And that's where I stand on it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with with Jesus and his teachings.
No, I don't either.
And I think we can learn a lot from that stuff. And I think Jesus was actually a lot more of a libertarian than most people give him credit.
I think there's a good argument for that.
Because if you actually look at the words of Jesus, I don't really know if Jesus ever really talked about heaven or hell very much.
Mm-hmm.
My thing is, I don't really believe in heaven or hell. I believe that when you're here on earth, you want to live a good life because you want to be able to rest easy at night. You know, you don't want to live, you don't want to do certain things because you don't want that hanging over your head.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's good ways to practice your life so that you can live more in harmony.
Absolutely. And these are universal principles. And there's a lot of that is spread throughout all of the world, or at least a lot of the world's religions. Very, very universal. We identified one of them in the satanic religion tenets that you were reading earlier, Arya, the being of empathy towards,
the golden
towards
rule.
other people. So, yeah, you see that echoed all over the place in so many religions.
My idea of heaven and hell, I think you can live in hell on earth.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I don't think it has anything to do with, because I don't think that once we die and whatever happens to us, I think we all have a spirit, but I don't know what happens after that, and I don't think it matters what happens after that. I think your experience here is heaven or hell while you're on earth.
Totally.
And so that's how I look at it, and I think that's what Jesus was trying to say. I'm not a Christian because I don't believe that we need the blood of Jesus. I mean, to me that sounds very sacrificial,
mm-hmm.
and it sounds like the complete opposite of what I mean. Whenever you take communion, you're drinking the blood of Christ and eating the
it's a little weird.
You're eating the flesh, and I mean, I'm not a cannibal,
right.
So it's hard for me to understand what that even means.
I appreciate your thoughts here tonight. Was it Andy?
Yeah, thank you.
Is that right?
Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew, for your call. Very well thought, and I appreciate you reaching out and sharing that with us. Thank you for the call.
Are great. And,
thanks, man.
Good luck
thank you.
To you and your trial and everything.
Thanks,
man.
dude. I really appreciate it. And for those that do want to help me out with the trial situation, I've got a sentencing coming up in April. If you want to send a letter, you can go to letters.freetalklive.com. It'll give you all the details on how you can write a letter to the judge if you feel like I've done good work and helped you or helped the community in some way, and you want to express that. It would be appreciated. You can go to letters.freetalklive.com. Let's continue. We have Reverend Ratspeed in Nevada. You're on Free Talk Live, Reverend Ratspeed.
You have me on caller ID now, don't you?
We do, sir. Go ahead.
So I would like to talk about a small side tangent in the 4 minutes that we have left until the top of the or bottom of the hour about the nature of magic. I heard that it was part of the conversation earlier. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. And so I would like to present my theory about the nature of magic and see if it sparks anyone's creativity, minds.
Okay.
I believe that magic is the point at which the imagined meets reality. In other words, when the intangible meets the tangible. When something transmogrifies in ancient religions, it usually transforms from one thing to another. But in this case, what is happening is it's a transformation of what we imagine could be, in other words, potential, into the thing which actually becomes real. It manifests itself. So therefore, I think a couple of things. This metaphor can be applied to several different things.
Well, before you do that,
yeah.
Can you point out any time in the existence of human history that something intangible became tangible?
Well, whenever we dream about something or whenever we conceive of something, in other words, it's usually limited by our own knowledge and our own perception of the world, of the universe, of reality.
Oh, I would say the answer to that question is any time an idea has become real, right? Which is everything. So everything that we see at one time was in someone's head. But it wasn't real until it was.
It's at the moment.
But the supplies were real, and the person doing it were real.
I actually came up with this theory when I was actually trying to do day trading for Bitcoin.
All right, hang on, Ratspeed. Okay. We'll continue here with your theory in moments. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. I get what you're saying, but some of the things that we take for granted today would absolutely be seen as magical to someone from, 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, right? But that's just ignorance, right?
That may be a factor. There's more coming up here. It is Free Talk Live.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. Classified documents have been found at the home of former US Vice President Mike Pence. It comes after sensitive documents were also found at the residencies of President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. US correspondent William Denslow reports.
The former Vice President's lawyer Greg Jacobs says a small number of classified documents were inadvertently boxed and transported to Mike Pence's personal residence at the end of the Trump presidency. His legal team says they were discovered last week, and Pence says he was unaware these documents existed and understands the importance of protecting sensitive information. President Joe Biden is also facing scrutiny for his handling of such materials after classified documents were found at his residences or former offices on 4 occasions. Around 300 documents, some marked as top secret, were also found last year at Donald Trump's primary residence at Mar-a-Lago. The Department of Justice has appointed special counsels to investigate the current and former president.
There is still no commitment from the United Nations Security Council members to send a multinational security force to Haiti. Gang-related violence has intensified there, leaving several police officers dead and blocking aid from entering the country. Jody Jacobs has more from UN headquarters in New York.
It's a critical time for Haiti, says its representative to the United Nations. Antonio Rodriguez says the gang violence is out of control, with police officers being killed almost daily. He is continuing the call to the UN to deploy a multinational force to assist with the security situation there. But there's no concrete commitments from member states. The UK says it's open to further discussions, while Japan says it will continue to support the Haitian Police Department. Meanwhile, the UN reports that murders are up by a third since last year, and close to 5 million people are facing acute hunger across the country.
And nominations for the Oscars have been released, with several blockbusters in with a chance of winning Best Picture. Our US correspondent Sally Patterson has more details.
The countdown has begun to one of Hollywood's most glamorous events. 8 films received 5 or more Oscar nominations. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once led the way with 11. It's a record-setting year for performers of Asian descent, but advocacy group Women in Film condemned the Oscars for its lack of female nominees in the Best Director category. The group accused Academy voters of not valuing women's voices. The Academy has not responded to the criticism. The Oscars will be broadcast on March the 12th, hosted by Jimmy Kimmel. Last year drew 16.6 million viewers, its second lowest figures on record.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live. You can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Aria.
And you can join us online anytime you want. Just head over to freetalklive.com. You can also follow us on our video streaming platforms. We have more than one, but the one we like to talk about is Odyssey. And you can go to video.freetalklive.com and find our Odyssey channel. You can subscribe to it. And we appreciate that if you do it. So once again, that's video.freetalklive.com. We're going to go back into your calls. We've managed to talk about various aspects of religion throughout the whole show here tonight. Maybe we'll talk about ChatGPT. It's not looking like we will, but
it's looking like
it's an option.
Probably not.
It's an option. But of course, the phones are open, so if that's what you want to talk about, you can do that. We're going to go back, though, to Reverend Ratspeed. He was trying to make a point about magic and how it's defined. We're not talking about card tricks or, making an elephant disappear. We're talking about something else here, right, Ratspeed?
Yeah, correct. It's more of a metaphor, I would say, but it's a metaphor that I don't think I even came up with. I want to before I go on, I just want to say I think you guys should have a show where you interview GPT and see what it says about itself.
It's kind of boring. Having used ChatGPT to some small extent, I've experimented a little bit with it. It's repetitive. If you ask a question that it doesn't really care for, it'll just keep repeating itself. And it wouldn't be a very interesting interview, at least certainly not to do it live. It would need heavy editing to cut out the repetitive parts. But we have shared some of the content from ChatGPT on the air. The thing is, ChatGPT isn't really a chatbot. Even though it's called ChatGPT, it doesn't actually have the ability to answer all of the questions you might want to ask it. So a lot of the times it will just simply refuse to answer and kick you back to the prompt. So
but if someone
let it know it's on the radio, maybe it'll liven up.
Yeah, if someone gave us a chatbot to whom we could ask, natural questions and it would generate natural answers and actually speak them out. Yeah, I'd be all about it.
It would just be like the Whopper from War Games. Anyway, so I wanted to just say real quick, yes, it's not about magic trick it's not trickery, it's not illusions. It's the idea that when something potential turns into something manifested into reality, it is that the moment and the place and the time and the mindset in which it happens could be considered in a way magic. I can give you an example. This is how I came up with the idea. When I was trying to day trade and I was trying to learn about stock books and order books for day trading and dealing with crypto, I looked at the visual representation of an order book and where the bid and the offer happens. And I started, and of course, me being the way I am, I started studying, finding out, well, how does this happen? How does it work? And why are some spreads bigger than others? And I started looking at and it came to the conclusion through different articles that I read, they don't actually know. It's more or less an agreement between two consenting parties. Whenever a bid and whenever someone sells stock and buys it, there is a trade. But that very actual moment in which it happens is not 100% defined, and that's why a spread can be a spread. So I started applying.
I don't even know what a spread is.
Yeah, we don't know or really care. Don't. Good God, don't explain it.
Okay, that's fine. Anyway, so that's the point. Is that
my question would be, what differentiates, if anything, magic from just plain old cause and effect in your definition?
What define? Okay, could you repeat that one more time?
What differentiates magic from just ordinary cause and effect? There's not. I can think about going. Let me explain the question. I can think about going in my car and driving home, right? And that's the thought. And then I can go out there, get in my car, and drive home, and that's the action. But there's nothing magical going on there. It's just me thinking something and then me doing something. So that's just cause and effect, I would argue.
Okay. So that's an interesting question. I don't know if I can answer that because I wasn't thinking about it in that term. I was thinking about more or less the will of the individual, which some people consider free, some people don't. They say it's the manifest of the universe, depending on who you are.
But see, that's the same thing. I will myself to drive home, so I go get in my car and I drive home. Again, it's the same scenario, but it's not magic.
I'm going to have to think about that one. That's a good question.
Yeah, I think it just depends on your perspective.
Right. That's what I was going to argue. I mean, it sounds like he's I don't want to say watering down the definition of magic, but changing it to the extent where it's indistinguishable from just existence.
I think magic or supernatural so-called occurrence in many cases is just something we don't understand yet, right? Like
well, the thing I wanted to get out of all of what I was going to present is that there is imagination, and then things that can exist in our mind that we have not objectified. In other words, it's potential.
Mm-hmm.
It can't happen in real life, or so we say, so we think. And then there's the things that we actually know are true, the objective reality, the material world, if you will, the things that can be measured and quantified. And the joining point between those two is where magic takes place.
I get what you're saying.
I would actually, so I would say virtual would be the word that I would use to define this place, a virtual place. It's neither imaginary nor is it real. It is at the joining point.
You're saying it's at the point of an idea becoming reality. That's the magic?
It's also, yes, and it's also sort of like dreaming. Like you can dream something, and the moment that you wake up, it's not real because it was all happening in your mind. But in some religions, they think of dream weaving, such as Aborigines, such as Native Americans, and I would even go so far as to say Christians and Muslims and everyone else around here that has monotheism believes that some sort of manifestation of the word, of the thought, the mind, and I would even say computer programming could become a form of magic. That's why I always say if you want to empower people, teach them how to code, because that is a form of wizardry. It's
casting spells. Thank you for the call tonight, Rat Speed. I appreciate hearing from you. I mean, some people would point out that all word is creative, that all word is, this has this power to create, not necessarily to manifest physical reality, but certainly to create ideas in other people's minds. Bad people use the word to control, right? Yeah. So mainstream media, politicians, Hollywood, they use words to manipulate people in negative ways, to join the military and die for politicians, or to pay taxes without thinking, or whatever it is, the thing is they're looking to do to you. Well, other words can free. Other words can open up. So, I mean, to that extent, we're all casting spells constantly. There's an interesting book, The Four Agreements, that I read while I was in jail. Somebody sent that to me. It was really good. And very, very short book, but it's this Mexican gentleman who is kind of like he was kind of in touch with shamanism type. Okay. There's a certain term for it down south of the border, but a lot of really great lessons for life. And he talks about how words are essentially just constantly casting spells on people. From as young as when you're born, your parents are casting spells on you basically without your awareness, and you're becoming essentially part of what they want you to be.
Right. Well, I mean, words certainly have an essence. There's words like ooze and stuff like that. Like the word ooze, it just has a certain quality to it that isn't pleasant, right? And ooze is the most obvious word I can think of, but it's countless words.
There's other ones,
like Chris Cantwell. We've talked about him before, and how his very name, Cantwell,
it's right there.
It's right there, right? Why is his life going? Well, he can't be well, right? So I mean, there's certainly something to that.
Something to that, absolutely.
Even if it's just unconscious.
Yeah, and I thought that was an interesting discussion. The number here, if you want to join us, it's 603-283-6160. Let's go. Now, normally we only allow one call per night, but since a different person called from this number earlier, I'm going to just presume this is actually Jack in Washington. Do we actually have Jack now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Remember, last time I called was like 3 or 4 months ago. I got off of my Trump, the Truth Social, Twitter. I got off of everything. And also you guys. So, but to religion, it's not the word Trinity. It's not in the Bible. This is scripturally based. If you write down, look it up on your own, you find a King James version. Second,
wait. You said the word Trinity isn't in the Bible?
It is not in the Bible anywhere. You can look it up.
Huh?
I know. I've tried.
No, the Trinity is the name that humans created for this thing.
Okay.
But the thing is frequently described as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost.
They do describe that.
That is mentioned in the Bible.
Right?
And that's true. And religion is this world. You can look this up. King James Version, if we're going to play the Bible game.
It's like saying the word Bible isn't in the Bible. It's like, well, yeah, duh.
Nice point. If you look it up, though, this world belongs to Satan. His system, God gave it over to him, just like Satan tried to give it to Christ when he was the 40 years or whatever. So the religion itself is a lie. It tries to draw you away from God. I was raised also a Jehovah's Witness. My mom let me know. She contacted me and let me know that she had called in. So that's why I'm calling in. It actually brought me further away from Christ, where Christ was nothing but nice. Try to organize people against other people. This is nice. The religions are evil, and that's the devil's system.
Well, yeah, I mean,
That's
Yahweh is. I would certainly agree with you. If I don't think any of these people exist, but if there is a devil, Yahweh of the Bible is a one-to-one fit for a description of an evil, tyrannical, vicious, malevolent deity.
Yeah, but I think he wanted to have not the bots follow him, and in order to not have a bots, even if you have all the power in the world to be God.
I didn't catch most of that.
You can't create something that just loves you for no reason.
Well, that's exactly what he wanted to do.
Look at the sky. Look at the grass. Look at the ocean. I mean, that's all the proof I need to believe in God. Not a religion. Emphasis on that.
The existence of the physical world is all you need to believe in the existence of the non-physical?
Yeah, we worship Michelangelo and Rembrandt.
I don't worship Michelangelo and Rembrandt, and I can see grass. I can touch grass.
Mankind does. Mankind does.
Reveres maybe, but that's not the same as worshiping.
Oh, okay. Pink. Madonna. Pick your poison. Everyone wants to worship and love something, and God put it out there as a nice person with his 9 attributes of kindness, I don't know. But all he does, and everyone hates him.
I think you're twisting the meaning of the word worship when you say that people worship Paris Hilton.
They raise their hands and they chant the name, dude.
They what? Say that again?
They raise their hands and they chant the name. Their concerts. I've been to Rage Against the Machine, Bad Religion. I've been to Ultimate Concerts in Cumberland.
I get what he's saying. I mean, there's definitely a lot of celebrity worship out there. There's
but it's not actual worship.
Well, it's not worship in that there's any kind of scripture that they're per se following, but they may consider the songs of that individual to be that. I don't know. It probably doesn't go to the level that you're talking about, Arya, but there is an obsession.
Certainly.
With celebrity. And, at what level does obsession cross over into straight up worship? You're dressing like the person, you're talking like the person, you want to be that person. Jack, just to clarify, so you were raised as a Jehovah's Witness. It sounds like you have rejected all organized religion, but you have your own personal belief system. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, and if I find a corner church, I can go in and they just read the Bible. They don't try to tell me what to think or what to wear. If I want to come in shorts and flops, that's what I get from God.
Do you still feel like as an individual religionist or whatever you would describe it, do you still feel like the Bible is the closest holy book to what God is trying to say to man, or are there other books that are of value to you?
Everything is of value because everything is God, and that's the Trinity question. God is everything. Jesus Christ is not God. The Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost.
But if Jesus Christ is part of everything, then he is God, right?
Well, we're all God.
So okay, so is Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. You literally just said Jesus Christ is not God,
yeah,
though.
you did say that, so you've corrected it now.
He's not. Okay, please, guys. He is not the ultimate. God, Yahweh, the hallowed name, he's everything. He created everything.
Right. So you would say that since everyone or everything is God, Jesus is just a piece of God, sort of like the rest of us are.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
We're all spirits of God and empty vessels, and God loves us all.
I agree with that. I agree with that, Jack. Thank you for the call tonight. I do appreciate hearing from you. The number if you want to join the show here is 603-283-6160. Another great book that I really like was the Tao Te Ching. You ever read that one?
I have not.
Maria? It's pretty libertarian, actually, in its writings, and it's one of those nice books where it's kind of just essentially like a book of poems, and you can kind of open it up to any old page. You don't have to read it straight through. You can just kind of pick a page and focus on that for the day or whatever. recommend that one.
I'm really behind these episodes where we end up getting into the weeds of religion. Make me realize that I used to love doing this. I watched atheist videos and interviews, and not because I was, a militant atheist. I just found the topic interesting.
Sure.
And at some point over the last decade or so, it just stopped being anything that I read about or watched videos about or just was interested in general. Like my readings and my knowledge about the history of Christianity and what is and isn't in the Bible is on a decline because I'm just not paying any attention to it anymore. Because at a certain point, I stopped caring what other people had to say about God. And it was like, it's just like LaVey wrote, if we're all discovering or creating our own gods, then just create your own. And at some point, I just started doing that. Like it became irrelevant to me what the Bible says or what Jack in Ocean Shore says or what anyone says about the Bible. What do I think is true? Because that has just as much weight, just as much chance of being true as it does for anyone else.
Absolute fact. Yeah, you're more likely to find God within than without. Yeah, I think. Let's continue.
But I do miss having all of that useless knowledge. I mean, because it was useless. But
I don't think you've got useless knowledge. I mean, it's good to have you on here for the conversations with the Christians because you were raised like that, so you have that knowledge, and it's not useless because it allows you to intelligently respond to those people and what they have to say. But let's continue here. We have another caller. You're on the air. What is your name? Tim.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're on the air.
Have y'all ever had any experience with a seventh son of a seventh son?
No. What's that mean?
Well, you ought to check it out.
How would I do that?
Well, you just have to find a seventh son of a seventh son.
What the hell does that mean? Yeah, meaning that a family that has 7 sons, I would have to find the youngest of those sons, and then he would have also had to have had 7 sons and find the youngest of those sons?
Close, yeah. It don't make no difference how many sons somebody had. If that 7th son had 7 sons, he could have 9 sons. But the 7th son of a 7th son, they have talents.
They have talents? Like what?
Yeah, I mean,
can they sing real good?
Well, no, but I've seen one. I seen a man get his arm nearly cut off one time and shooting blood about 4 foot in the air, and he walked up and touched it and immediately stopped.
Okay, so the 7th son of a 7th son. This is like an angel in human form. Is that what?
I don't know about all that.
Hold up! I just want to hear more about this story. So you saw a man near get his arm cut off in some kind of accident, and then some guy, the 7th son of a 7th son, walked up, touched him, and he stopped bleeding instantly.
Right.
Where was this?
Down in Texas.
Was it on like a factory, or where were you at the time?
It was a working place.
You were at a working place. You want to tell us a little more than that?
They was. I was just a child.
Oh, you were a little child.
Just hanging out at a factory.
Yeah. How old were you?
8 years old.
8 years old. And what happened next?
They took the man to the hospital.
Okay.
Was he okay? Was he still bleeding? I mean, obviously not.
He said he stopped bleeding.
Right. So I mean, why did he need to go to the hospital?
Well, he had his arm nearly cut off.
Okay.
But it wasn't bleeding?
No, it stopped bleeding. I mean, it was bleeding a little bit, but it wasn't like gushing out anymore.
Now, was this guy known as being a sort of miracle worker, or was this the first time he'd ever kind of sprung into action that you were aware of?
He didn't like to use his talents at all.
Mm-hmm.
So this person worked there?
No, well, he was there a lot. He didn't work there. He just happened to be there at that time.
He also just hung out at the factory.
What happened?
Well,
we don't know. He didn't say it was a factory. He said it was a working place. But did he do anything else noteworthy that you were aware of? I mean, surely there were rumors around town.
I seen a woman had a frying hot boiling skillet full of grease, and it got knocked off and run all over her arm.
Mm-hmm.
And he blowed his breath on it, and it never blistered or never showed any kind of burns or anything.
Wow. That's a hell of a story, man. Now, was he related to you in any way?
I can't say.
Is that because you don't want to say?
Because I don't want to say, yeah.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Where are you calling from tonight?
Texas.
Texas, all right. And I thank you, man.
Check it out.
All right, that's
Check it
interesting.
out.
It's interesting. Thank you for the call tonight. I appreciate it. Seventh son of a seventh son. Let's go to Saheed. He's calling from Maryland. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Saheed.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Welcome, sir.
So I was just listening to the conversation about the devil and magic, and you guys talked a lot about Islam for quite a minute. So I was wondering, do you guys see any relationship between religion and in the state? Because in Islam,
the state's the dominant religion of the globe.
Yeah, the state is the religion that atheists, for the most part, believe in. The state essentially has all the trappings of the most evil religion on the planet. They don't have any kind of redeeming qualities like a lot of religions do. But there's a lot of similarities between them.
I got you. And so, do you guys, especially specifically when it comes to like Christianity, at least for actually, let me rephrase it. So in Islam, the devil is kind of like really related with a lot of this stuff, but with basically all the animosity that we have in between each other, and it kind of creates this tribalism that goes on. From our perspective, it creates that tribal. Have you guys ever read anything about NVC from Marshall Rosenberg?
NDP? Oh, no, wait.
NVC.
Yeah. What's it? What is it again? Nonviolent communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty culty.
Oh yeah, I know. I know a little about that. Yeah. It's weird.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty culty. And to be honest, I think it has a lot to do with religion, because the way that he kind of like describes the negative kind of like talk that we have in our heads, right? Mm-hmm. And he basically comes to the conclusion that it's that negative kind of like shame, guilt, and whatnot that you guys actually, a lot of people relate with religion and cultish kind of behavior. Basically, that is what creates the divisions that we have in society. A lot of that trauma. And kind of like reliving that trauma, and that's basically how I see the Quran and even the Bible describes kind of like how Satan works for the most part, in creating those divisions, but starting inside rather than overtly,
Yeah, I think that negative self-talk is really detrimental. It is something that it's important to be aware of in our lives, and be aware that isn't necessarily you. That what it is, I don't know, whether it's some sort of signal from somewhere in the ether or the devil or whatever you want to call it. It's important to reject those things.
I don't know about this idea that, like you mentioned, shame and guilt being, I think you said negative emotions. I don't know if I can agree that they're negative. Not
negative emotions. Not negative emotions. It's that negative. It's like distorted. It's not logical thinking, but it's like distorted type of thinking. It's talked a lot about like psychology circles and whatnot, and I think it's a big part of like religion and specifically that that negative spirit that goes on.
But it's not negative. Guilt can be tremendously positive if it causes someone to go out there and right a wrong because they don't want to live with what they've done, or it prevents them from doing anything wrong because they know they'll feel guilty about it.
That's a good point.
It's like you can kind of like get into the weeds of like the differences between like a feeling versus the actual judgment statement, where somebody's like actually guilty versus feeling guilty, the second one where it's not actually a feeling, but it's coming from external. It's like something that's imposed, like external or internal, really, but it's really just imposed upon us kind of culturally.
Yeah, but if it's being imposed upon them externally, then it's not an emotion that they're feeling.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's irrelevant to the question at hand, right?
No, that's actually the point. I like to kind of like distinguish, and that's what NPC kind of like talks about, distinguishing the feelings from, for example.
Gotcha.
So it's sort of like it's technically like a type of violence in a sense. It's like
I wish we had more time to talk about it, but Saheed, you called right at the end of the show. But I do appreciate hearing from you, and feel free to call back any old time. Definitely appreciate all the input tonight from all of our callers. Very busy night on the phones. I don't think we ever got to beyond the first topic.
Good to know what people think.
Yeah, very interesting viewpoints. So quite a variety as well. So definitely appreciate the input. We're back tomorrow night online. You can join us in the meantime. Share your thoughts over at freetalklive.com and social.freetalklive.com. On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of
where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS